as to what's in the book. So if you think you've got
Yeah, we're live. Hi, guys.
teaser information, and it never stops coming at you. So yeah, so that's book one. That's book one, and there's over 100 pages of endnotes there.
Welcome, everybody, to Get Closer. We have a special guest today, Gary Wayne, author of the book Genesis 6 Conspiracy and Genesis 6.
Hey, Diane, good to see
Part
you.
2 is out, hot off the presses. How are you doing, Gary? Glad to have you here.
Well, doing very well, and thank you for inviting me to your podcast, and looking forward to conversation today. And I'm not sure how many of your listeners are aware of me, but if we do things right and I do things properly, maybe we'll raise a few eyebrows today.
Yeah. I think it says it all in the title, right? Genesis 6 Conspiracy. It's like stuff you don't hear about in churches mostly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm so blessed to have you on, and I know my audience will love it. And like I said, I'm not quite done with the first book, but I'll be getting the second one ASAP because it's hot off the presses, and it has nothing but 5-star reviews so far on Amazon.com. So
Wow.
yeah, can you tell people where the best place to get your book is?
Sure. The fastest, easiest way to get a hold of my book is through my website, through the Genesis6conspiracy.com. That's the number 6conspiracy.com. Now, on that website, I have a generous excerpt of all 84 chapters of book 2 and all 98 chapters.
Hey, Phil, good to see you, mate.
So they are, loaded with information. There's a generous excerpt up there. It's just a drop in the bucket as to what's in the book. So if you think you've got it all, that's just teaser information.
Yeah.
And it never stops coming at you. So
Phil, did you get to do your stream?
yeah, so that's
book one.
That's book one, and there's over 100 pages of endnotes there. But book two's got a little bit different format because it has all the annotations, all the footnotes.
Hey, Shawnee, good to see you.
Because book 2 is a little bit different approach than book 1. So book 1 is written from a significant Christian biases, but one of the things I wanted to do there was sort of make Christians aware of how the world
Hey,
works.
boss, good to see you, bro.
And I have a lot of outside information in their own testimony, and I let them speak in their own words. Because I don't think people to say that, hey, you manipulated it. So I give you the words, I give you the source, you can verify it for yourself, and how that intersects with the Bible. So we cover a lot of things off in the Bible, but we also cover off, their perspective of prehistory.
Yeah.
What they've done over
I love
our
that about
history.
the book because I'm almost halfway through, and I love that because it takes the true history of where did we get all this crap from.
Yeah, it'll help you understand the whole world, and it starts to get you into the understanding of we need to understand prehistory to understand prophecy. It's the full context for the creation of the Adamites and how things are going to play out. So the principles and the values are awesome in the Bible, absolutely, and what we teach in Christianity, but they're taught without the context of prehistory and prophecy. So book 1 is kind of one of the most unique books that may be out on the marketplace, and it is something in the genre that is absolutely unique. There's nothing out there like it, and it's a 6,000-year investigation into the House of Dragon, the visible ones on the earth, and gives you some information as to the invisible ones as well.
I was going to ask you how you went at baseball.
So book 2, I wasn't good. I could just talk about first one, the book 1. I really love the balance there, because what people in all corners of the world and different perspectives have the tendency to do is once they get a hold of the truth, it's extremely this way with it or extremely against it. And I always find God's always like in the middle and the truth is in there. So I love how you have the balance of showing it everything under that context.
Well, because we need to understand how God is letting things play out. I mean, he can intercede, he does intercede, but he only intercedes to make sure all the names in the book of life have an opportunity to keep their name in the book of life and not have it blotted out. So that intercession is only done to make sure all of those names that were created and written before creation have that opportunity. So if we want to understand why God lets things go on in the world, we have to understand he believes in free choice in
That's
this
right.
epoch for sure, and I would think ongoing, although the consequences after would suggest that you might be foolish not to go with God's ways, which as we see being played out on the earth, only leads to destruction if you're not following God's ways. Yeah. And so if we want to understand why things go on in the world, we have to understand that there's a limited time to fill all those names in the book of life. And God is Alpha and Omega, as is Jesus, and they knew everything that was going to happen. But they loved the spirits that they created so much from before creation that they'll be patient and let the rebellious ones and the spurious ones convict themselves, because it's all through free choice. And just as angels had free choice to choose God or not, they knew God intimately, many chose to rebel. And according to end time prophecy, as many as a third will have rebelled. Whether they all rebelled at the beginning in pieces, that's really kind of irrelevant. It's just we have a final number, and we know it's a large number because in both Revelations and Daniel it talks about 10,000 times 10,000 angels, which is 100 million, and then other references to the angels is they're uncountable. So that could be just an allegorical number and be bigger, right? So, but if it is 100,000 and a third rebel, that means depending on how you want to make that third, it's either 33 million or 50 million.
Yeah.
It's a lot, and not all of them are in the pit prison.
Yeah, and it's important that it's 1/3, still 2/3 for us.
Still 2/3 that are loyal, but things are being played out so that the lake of fire that was created for them, will be played out, and they will convict themselves. So yeah, it's important to understand that humankind, the reason why we're going to be raised above angels is because we were created mortal. Yes, Adam had access to the tree of life until the deception in the garden.
Was crappy, was it, Diane? Wow, so it wasn't anything sort of pre-programming in it. It was just crap.
But in the physical world, that was where that immortal life would be versus in heaven. And so it's important to understand that humans were created mortal and without intimate knowledge of God. And thus through faith,
find it out for yourself and have that free will choice.
That free will choice to secure that information yourself and not have it all or most of it. And certainly the angels did not have all the secrets or wisdom of God. As 1 Corinthians talks about, the princes, the archers of the world were aware of the resurrection, they would not have insisted or assured that Jesus was crucified, right? Yeah. Because that basically ended their rebellion. Yeah, it was. Yes, there still was some time to be played out.
Was that bad? Was it, Diane? Wow.
He went to speak to the ones in the prison while he was in the grave, and there's Peter. So I think it's important to understand that we're going to be raised higher than angels. That
link I just posted, that's one of the October the 8th terrorist attack.
Angels in eternity, as inheritors of eternity, and that we're going to judge those angels for their crimes against us and crimes against the earth. And
inheritance that we have, I think it just blows my mind of what it says in Ephesians, that we have an inheritance to give him from our free will little mortal lives in this little time that we're here on earth.
And
it's a gift.
And we're also assured that God is going to write on our hearts.
Wow.
And so one deduces within the spirits that will have more control over the soul and the body in an uncorrupted world in eternity, that we'll be able to follow the ways of God and not have to worry about stumbling. And of course, in the meantime, we are all sinful and we all stumble, but that's why the Alpha Omega plan was always about, if things played out through free choice, that and inevitably that they knew how it would play out, that you would have to send Jesus as the Redeemer to ensure that the sins would be forgiven and we could be raised into eternity. To be like angels, but even though we have human fathers.
Yeah, man, it's truly glorious, the power he's giving us in this little short life frame. And then you have extreme one side, oh, come, Jesus, come. And it's like, his time is mercy. It's giving more time for those who are not yet awakened to awaken to the true reality that's being played out here.
Yes, and so we should view the creation of Adamites as, in my opinion and my understanding, and I'm not a minister, I'm just a researcher. So I think the Adamites were created as the resolution to the angelic rebellion that will play out in the ordained time when it's reserved for. So yes, this is how we get that opportunity that God knew would come along, but it has to play out that way. So there's perfect justification for those who are going to be resurrected, and perfect justification who will receive the second death, and perfect justification for those who are going to remain in the lake of fire forever.
Yeah, and the beauty and the glory of how he made us too, even though we're weak in our mortal frames, he made us in his image.
Yes.
And I think, like, we're, just my opinion, I'll throw out my opinion, we're made unlike, I think, any other creation that's listed that we have to go by, in being able to relate to the uncreated God, because we're made in his image.
Yep.
And so we have those.
Hang on, in the New Order movie, they're showing like really wealthy white people and how their servants, the South Americans, how they rise up and overthrow them. And it's across the world. It's not just in this one town. So it's them rising up against us. Apparently we're the enemy. Well, they were aware of that anyway.
Capacities, those wide range of emotions, because he does. We have mental capacities with the different facets of our human nature, our man-like nature, because we're made in his image.
Yeah, and the things that God creates,
already done that,
and allows and permits, whether it's emotions or it's knowledge, is not evil.
It's already done that, Trey Smith, Nimrod 1.
How those things are applied. So, and you have to have the discipline and the wisdom to apply those things, which we tend to lack at this point in time. But the point of it is, I think in this experience, is to have the spirit to do the best that you can, understanding you're going to fall short, because nobody is in the same classification as Jesus, who came into a corrupt world and never sinned. I mean, it's just a standard that is only, the word of God, or as I like to say, the logos of the Theos, or the Jehovah of the Elohim has the ability to do. So, and he did it for us. And I can't imagine the Word who created all things knew from the beginning that how it was going to play out, and he would have to come and suffer the way that he did. But yet he did it willingly, and it wasn't easy. I mean, he was crying out from the cross to Abba, his father.
And even before then, what was that about with the tears that he knew he was going in the Garden of Gethsemane, the tears of blood, sweating of blood and stuff.
Man.
Yeah. And I heard an interesting take.
The battery was unplugged. I've nearly run out of battery, so I just replugged it. Hopefully it'll stay okay.
And what he saw, what God could have seen in us, and his plan to redeem us through his son. And, we're also referred to as his bride, and Jesus as the bridegroom.
Yes.
And so Adam being the bride and Eve being the bride, or Adam being the bridegroom and Eve being the bride, when she fell, he was like, well, what if it happened like this? Because we're not given much in the translation of what actually transformed or happened. Mm-hmm. But what if it happened to where Eve knew she messed up and came running to Adam, and Adam saw that and knew that he would be separate from her.
Yeah.
And he said, I'm going with you, kind of bait. Like, I'm not going to leave you alone, and took a bite of the apple as well.
Yeah, we're not really told that but somehow Adam is persuaded.
They try and make out that Satan coerced Eve into having sex with him, and that's why she fell. But that doesn't explain why Adam fell. So it's not about Satan having sex with Eve at all. They make out because he beguiled her. That means he sexually had sex with her. But what about Adam? It doesn't work like that.
Whether it's to not be separated or to understand the additional knowledge or not. So we're not really told explicitly or detailed as to what was going through the heads. And we're not told why he would be susceptible to wanting to be like God.
Right.
I guess it's enticing if somebody were to offer that to you. But they didn't have knowledge of good and evil at that point in time either.
Right.
So they were being persuaded by evil.
Yeah,
And
it's just
not-
like a little kid, they don't know, they don't have that filter of right and wrong yet.
Yeah.
It's only set in standard by the mother and father,
Yeah. So, and the difference is after Eden is we know there's evil in the world, and yet we're still seduced by the same temptations.
Yeah.
And that's one of the ultimate lessons. And, even in the millennium, after the end time, there is going to be people who are going to rebel. And I think that's a time that is set aside, for the completion of the names in the book of life, because it's obviously the earth is going to be repopulated and being from almost completely wiped out. And that I think that is a time where it's to show humans that we are no better than the angels.
Right.
That just as the angels knew God and Jesus intimately,
Right.
so will we as he rules on earth. And yet there will be a rebellion after Satan is released after 1,000 years. So I think it's just everything is covered off in the patience and the love that God has to sit through all these horrible things that he knew would transpire, but he wants us to choose whether angelic or human, him. And it's the only way that it's sustainable going into eternity.
Yeah. And I just love that perspective that minister Chuck Missler had on it, because that sounds more like God, like us in the image of God too.
Yeah.
Not wanting to be separated from this amazing, beautiful being that he just made from Adam's rib, and said, you guys are going to be fruitful, multiply, do all this together, and him having love and wanting to fall for it. And I could see God being like, I'm going to save him.
Yeah, and Mr. Missler was a very, very intelligent and researched and informative people. I would encourage people to seek out his books and writings and read those. They're all worthwhile.
Yeah.
I've not read all of them, but I've read several, and I have a few in my library behind me. So.
Yeah, he's a great man of God, great gift, that's for sure to us. Yeah, but it's just, if you can kind of give the context for those who have maybe never heard of Genesis 6 and like, what are these guys talking about? Maybe we can lay some ground for that, because I know a lot of people a lot of people still may not have heard of that. And then you get the extremes, right? You get the people, oh yeah, it all went bad here, and then go crazy. And I love the way your book just puts out facts from all angles.
Yeah.
History and religions and all of that.
Yeah. So one of the concepts of book one is that there is a.
Okay, what I'm saying, Shawnee, if the reason Eve fell was because she had sex with Satan, that doesn't explain why Adam fell. So, and I don't think Adam having sex with Eve made him fall. I think he ate of the fruit as well. I don't think it's about sex.
Worldwide legacy that talks about the same type of events.
Could be though.
Prehistory and history, and with their own prophecy from different cultures and religions through a polytheist lens versus the monotheist lens that we would view things. And it's important to understand that. So when we talk about this legacy, it's in all cultures continents all around the world. But we get the truth, the unmanipulated truth in the Bible versus the polytheist biases versus, you could call it a Christian biases, but I would say biases of truth. But I am biased. So, and so Genesis 6 is talked about right around the world, in all cultures, in all continents, in all religions, and it's the flood story. And what's interesting, though, is the preamble to the flood story. And in the preamble, bookended by the genealogy that finishes in chapter 5 with Noah and his 3 sons, you have 4 really discombobulating passages that when I first read, when I wanted to research prophecy because I wanted to know whether Hal Lindsey was accurate or not, and I had to start to log things in the Bible. Every time I would get to Genesis 6, verses 1 through 4, I'm going, whatever they're talking about with giants, I don't want anything to do. That's crazy talk. So, but eventually in doing the research on prophecy, I understand there's a relationship to fallen angels, giants, and demons, and we need to understand that. And so I started to log some of that and to try and become familiar with what the heck are giants doing in the Bible.
Yeah.
So this is the sons of God who are going to go to human females and create giants, or some of the English translations will mean Nephilim, will be translated as Nephilim. That is the transliterated word out of Hebrew. And some people think it doesn't mean giant.
Yeah, I was just going to hint at that because people will take, oh, well, it says the sons of God. Well, it kind of alleviates that when it says come into the daughters of men.
Yeah, you would think, but it's because there are other references in the Old Testament to the sons of God or children of God, as it refers to Israel, right, in some prophecies for the end time, not for the flood, in Hosea and the book of Isaiah, which is perfectly consistent with the understanding of the sons of God as humans in the New Testament that comes because of the crucifixion and implemented as doctrine at the time of the Pentecost, that we will be resurrected to be like angels in the future time. So it's prophetic. It's not have anything to do with the Old Testament. So when we look at the word in book 2, we'll talk more about it later, but I was convinced to write book 2 because Christians seem to require even more information. And so book 2 is written directly at Christians. And I said I would never write a sequel, but the demand for wanting to know all the things about angels and giants and demons and prophecy in the Bible sort of had me drop the book I was writing to write book 2, and then I'll back to writing that other book. So how do we know that sons of God are humans? And one of the things that people can also do, I'll just throw this out, and I have a great document. If you go to the website, contact the author, ask for the documents and how we know the sons of God are angels, or I'll send you both anyways, and how we know the sons of God are not humans. So I'll give you both biblically based arguments, and I put that all in book 2 as well, so you've got it all there. So yeah, we have some passages of the sons of God elsewhere that we can kind of rely on.
Right.
And so you'll have Job 1:6 and 2:1 that talks about the sons of God who went to present themselves at the throne of God in heaven, not as on earth, as some people would change the meaning of that. And I get that could God set up a throne on earth? Sure, he could. Right?
Yeah, that's what he's going to do when he makes all things new.
Yeah, but we don't have scripture for that. Right. So I would encourage people not to add on to scripture, and if you do, say you're speculating. So angels are required to report, and Satan reports at the same time. He's a fallen one, but he has a special obligation even after he's been degraded versus some of the other fallen angels that went to the pit prison both before and after the flood. So we have sons of God used there. So I understand that that's an argument. But if you get the same understanding, the same term in the same book as in the book of Job, that would be something that you could not make an excuse for, that these are humans, or rationalize is a better word, that these are humans. I would go to Job 38, 4-7, where it says the morning stars are understood as an order of angels, as I will talk about in book 2, and stars are an allegory for angels, and the sons of God sang for joy at creation. Well, we were not there at creation.
No.
Only the angels were, as Psalms 104 talks about.
Right.
And so we have that, but still there's another passage that's interesting, is we have the council of the gods in Psalms 82, the sons of the Most High. And again, that's the same term, only for the fallen angels, again, just as you can have sons of God that are loyal angels and sons of God that are the fallen ones. And these are the fallen ones in their assembly that Satan sits atop of, that rules over the 70 nations, both before and after the flood.
Yeah.
And so we get that as, but still, I know it's hard when you have this cognizant dissonance in your brain about these giants and what you've been told in the churches. We want to avoid the topic like crazy. I don't know why, because the Bible is the most preternatural book ever written. Why you would accept some of the preternatural stories and not others is kind of not consistent, but it is what it is. So there are other ways we can know that the sons of God are angels, is because biblically, and you notice I haven't gone to extracurricular
stuff yet.
passages. So, and if I do use it, I measure it against what the Bible says.
Yep. Yeah, because it was quoted, if you're
Yeah.
talking about Enoch, it was quoted in the Bible, you know?
Sure, absolutely. And they use the term sons of God there. I will put that in a detailed way in book 2, but for the sake of keeping it to what's in the Bible,
Right.
if people who are really pushing back on,
Or
I would
struggling
say,
with it, wrestling with it in their conceptions and
yeah,
perception.
there are passages in the Old Testament where stars are used with angels, as in the sons of God in Job 38. There are stars and the host of heaven, as in Daniel.
Diane, how the heck can salmonella be in chocolate samples? How could that possibly? Salmonella is when you handle a fresh a pig part or a poultry before you cook it. That's salmonella. That's how you get salmonella. So how does that work with chocolate? They've done this on purpose.
8, where you have some of the starry host who are trampled on by Antichrist in the end time. You have angels and the host of heaven, and stars as being accounted as fallen angelic beings that people
on purpose.
in the Old Testament. So you have the circular arguments supporting the different descriptions of who the sons of God were understood as in the time of the flood. And these were the rebellious ones who, in their second revenge, as I talk about in book 1, versus the first revenge, which was by Satan in Eden to bring down Adam, now he's going to create spurious offspring by deceiving his followers as fallen angels to procreate something that is a violation against the Holy Spirit, violation against the laws of creation, to be the terrible ones, as they're described in Ezekiel 32 and Isaiah 14 and Isaiah 25 and other passages, as these terrible ones who are going to do terrible things to humankind. They're there to wipe humankind from the face of the earth.
Yeah, they hate us. They hate God's image in us. And the funny thing is like, so how do you equate that then? If you think sons of God, or if you just say you think they are man, even though it says came into the daughters of men after sons of God, how does that create a giant?
Yeah.
Because God did not create that in the original order.
Well, and the argument that comes back I've had.
I bet you have. That's all.
I get them all, and you
Yeah.
need to be able to answer them all, right? Which is
Right.
important because we don't want to take the Bible out of its understanding.
Right.
Pro or for against chance. We don't want it to be what the Bible actually says. And so, yeah, I mean, you can't do extraordinary things as a human. You can't be larger or you can't have additional powers. And what happens with the transference of DNA from the angels when they take a bodily form is that they pass on gifts. So what's interesting in Genesis 6:3, one of the gifts is immortality of the body and of the Xerox, so to speak, counterfeit spirit passed on by the fallen angels that you have created gods within the physical world. Kind of what Satan was also offering Adam and Eve, right?
Yeah. You should be like God.
Yeah, pretty much identical. And there's this knowledge that I talk about that's part of the mystical religions that comes out of the seven sciences created by Enoch, son of Cain, and there's two Enochs
Can you
in the
touch on
Bible.
that?
Yeah, well, we'll come back to that.
Okay.
Otherwise, I'll be down on too many rabbit trails because
It's amazing.
they're all
man. I just love it.
interesting. So
Yeah.
that they're creating these immortal bodies and these immortal spirits. Now, the spirit is immortal, so it can't be killed in a way that we would understand it.
Right.
And
they're not going
so-
to be dealt with till the
Yeah.
final judgment. Right.
Now, in one of the great manipulations of prehistory that is taught is that 120 years was the commission of Noah to build the ark, except the math doesn't work. And I don't believe Alpha Omega would make a math error, or there would be written down as a math error. So if you look at the
I don't
verses,
either.
I won't go through all of the verses right now, but if you go through the verses, you understand that from the time of the birth of the sons to the time Noah enters the ark is 100 years, not 120. And if you look at the language and you take that back to the Hebrew, it's clearly talking about the spirit isn't going to be, his spirit isn't going to be in the world
Striving up
permanently.
man forever.
Yeah. Right? So he's going to.
Oh,
save the
you're
body,
right.
The soul
Yeah.
and the body, which are part of the physical world, and the spirit comes from heaven. And then when a human dies, the soul and body is what decays in this world, and our spirit, according to Ecclesiastes, goes back to heaven and in a sleep-like state. As we're told, we sleep hundreds and hundreds of times in the Bible. But the counterfeit spirit isn't permitted to sleep, but the body dies. And it becomes the disembodied spirits. And we see these show up as devil spirits in the New Testament that Jesus
Wow.
is talking about.
Going to and fro throughout the dry places of the earth. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're also referenced in
Well, we know where he ended up, don't we, Diane? Suicide.
the same context as unclean spirits and evil spirits, but they're used interchangeably in these accounts.
Yep.
And so when we look at that word devil, it's not a fallen angel that is doing this. The word is daemon. The word for
Disembodied.
devil, yeah, the word for devil, as it's associated with Satan, is diablos, not daemon. And you never have daemon associated with Satan. So these are daemon spirits.
Yeah, it doesn't say she ate an apple. It's just assumed she ate an apple. But she did eat from fruit of the tree of good and bad.
Which is the Greek word, source word for demon in English.
Yeah. Disembodied spirit.
These are the disembodied spirits, yes. And so they are either going to, in the occult belief, make it to the occult heaven where the fallen angels not in the pit prison rule from. In Hades, Sheol, the other world, and when Argatha, the 10,000 different names they have there for it.
Yeah.
That, and we see that in the occult rituals, whether it's the Egyptians sailing on a boat into the other world, or in the Ugaritic texts where the Rephaim are going to take these dead kings into the other world through a portal. and all around the world. It's the same sort of
Yeah,
ritual.
they
So whether they
crack up
get
at you when
Yeah,
you say, "Oh, you're a Satan worshiper," and they'll just crack up at you, and they're thinking, "No, I worship Ein Sof." And it's
Yeah.
like, wait a minute,
Amen to that,
who's
Shorty.
Ein Sof? Oh,
Yeah.
he's a snake in the tree. Who's that
Yeah.
sound like?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And Satan has many different names.
Yep.
Which we need to know that, and different looks as well.
Yeah,
And
he can come as an angel of light.
Yes,
Yeah.
or as as the anointed cherubim,
Mm-hmm.
or as a dragon and a serpent.
That's why the Bible tells us to
or as
test
a
the spirits.
Yeah, or as a morning star. That's
Mhm.
the bright aspect, and different names for each. So we need to be aware of that. And Hallel would be the bright shining star name, which is in Isaiah 14, where you have a Italian word substituted for a Hebrew word into English. So it should be Hallel ben Shakar, as the Hebrew is. It should be Hallel, son of the morning, not Lucifer, which is the god of the Gnostics and the secret societies.
There you
It just ought not to be there. Not all translations have Lucifer in there, but that should not be translated accordingly.
go.
And so you have two other places where these disembodied spirits can go. One is roaming the earth as in dry places, and they need an Oikotarian or a soul and a body to possess to interact physically in this world, and a place of rest because they have no place of rest. Or the other place that they're going to go, and this is so interesting in why Isaiah 14 and other passages, but particularly Ezekiel 32 on the terrible ones. These are the terrible ones that are in the prisons and the sides of the pit prison there for doing terrible things to humankind and were slain. There's also the fallen angels there that's in there in Ezekiel 32 in the KG translation, where it says the mighty are also talking to, guess what, another Rephaim giant, Pharaoh of the beast empire bloodlines. And that is the Hebrew word El, small case, for an angel or a god.
Yep.
And they're also speaking to Pharaoh from there in this really unique dual, what I would call a dual prophecy. So yeah, it's this understanding of prehistory helps us to understand that when people say that they're talking to their ancestors in seances or hypnotism or past lives, or they're dealing with spirit guides, these are not humans.
Yeah,
None of them.
you shouldn't trust anything they say because they are master deceivers and they've been around for thousands of years and they know a lot more than you do.
Yeah, they they're liars.
Yes, their job is to steal, kill, and destroy. And they're the father of lies. Yeah.
But then people say, as in the book of Psalms, in the book of Hebrews, that angels are spirits, so they can't have sex with humans.
Yeah, I've heard that one before too. Yeah.
Just as Matthew, the book of Matthew talks about that there's no sex in heaven, but they never like to really utilize Luke's account, which is a much more expanded version on it, that basically says that we're going to be like angels when we go to heaven. That's after the resurrection, where there's no need for sex in heaven.
And everything, and you're made like Jesus when you see him, and
yeah. So, but still, they stick on to it and they say, but if you can't do it in heaven, you can't do it on earth. Well, of course, that's why it's a violation against the laws of creation. But here's how they do it. And here's how we know they can do it. So if we look at the book of Genesis, you have in Genesis 18 and 19 a very revealing passage about angels. And we have angels descriptions in various forms throughout the Bible, but you have Jehovah of the Elohim making a physical body for himself so that he can interact physically with Abraham. Because he touches, he eats, he speaks, he
has him in the tent and says, hey.
Yeah, exactly. And the angels that accompany him, Abraham doesn't at first recognize them as angels. So they can be in human form and you would not know them. And then these two angels go on to Sodom, but yet the people in Sodom knew they were angels, even though they were described as men. So they can make themselves known. And then for people who say, well, you don't have a New Testament version on it. Well, of course I do. Hebrews, yeah. Hebrews 13 is probably the best accounting for it, where it says to be nice to strangers, lest you come across an angel unaware.
Unawares. I've had that happen before, I believe.
Oh, I'm sure we all have.
Yes.
I just hope I react it properly.
Yeah, same here. Same here. Brother.
So you should, yeah, that's why we get that kind of warning. So if they can make an oiketerian for themselves, a soul and a body, then they would have DNA in that oiketerian, and that would be passed on, which is how they do it. And
Right.
for that term oiketerian, that comes from Jude 1:6 in the word habitation, that the angels left, where it's
Left
talking
their
about
first
the angelic,
estate.
to do the crimes that they did. And that word means a dwelling place for a spirit.
Wow.
They left a dwelling place for their spirit in heaven, and they can be as a spirit being in this world, but not interact physically unless they have that oiketerian, which is the soul and the body.
Yeah.
So just as we have our spirit merge with the soul, and only God and Jesus can separate the spirit from the soul.
And people have a rich.
And Vars, if they try and grow vegetables on farms when there's a famine on, they're going to have to surround the farms with armed guards, because no one's going to wait for the fruit, for the vegetables to grow. They're going to be so hungry, they'll just go in and steal it all.
Spiritual encounters and experiences all the time. Yeah.
Amen, Shawnee.
That's the oiketerian. We get oiketerian used one other time in the New Testament, which again is quite revealing as understanding this dwelling place or a home, right? A home for where the spirit is going to be. And that's in 2 Corinthians 5:2, where it says house in heaven. That's oiketerian. And it's the house in heaven that we are desiring and craving
that we long for, our souls crying out for.
Yeah. Now, variations of the oiketerian word are used throughout, but only specifically as the dwelling place. It's only used twice in the Greek in the New Testament. So that's how it's done, and that's why there is a oiketerian created for Jesus through Mary by the Holy Spirit, that as a spirit being becomes flesh as the word, and that it has nothing to do with sex of any sort, but it allows him to do his commission and to be fully affected by the whole world, and to be crucified without sin for the world. So
and it also make a way for us back to the Father in heaven and what we were originally created for.
And also answers why Melchizedek was blessed, or Melchizedek blessed Abraham, who's going to be the father of Israel, to create the tribe of Judah, who's going to produce David, and that lineage is going to produce Mary.
Yeah. Wow.
And because that, again, according to the book of Hebrews, Melchizedek has no genealogy, no beginning or end.
And we are
Omega.
And he made us kings and priests according to the order of Melchizedek.
Yeah. And that's why he inherits us as the immortal, as being replaced. And I think part of the resolution to the fall of Satan, who was probably high priest as well.
Yeah, he was in charge of the praise to Yahweh. Yeah. And so it's interesting there. I don't know if I told you or not, but I do deliverance too. I'm a deliverance minister. And so disembodied spirits, just says it in the name. What are they looking for? A body. They're looking for a body to inhabit and get their lust, their personalities through, all while defiling God's image that they hate.
Yeah. And in the Old Testament, we get a couple of passages that aren't recognized as talking about these types of spirits. And so in Psalms 106 and Deuteronomy 32, it's talking about devils that are sacrificed to. So just as devils are talked about in the New Testament, where it goes back to daemon, not diablos, and this doesn't go back to a word that we have for devil in the Old Testament, because they don't get another specific word that is directly linked as a root word for devil. But what we do get is the Hebrew word shade or shed or shade, depending on how you want to pronounce that, which means a demon spirit.
Surprise.
Surprise, surprise, surprise. And with the post-Diluvian giants, you have the Rephaim.
Right. Yeah.
And
The
the people-
Rephaim.
And
what-
so what,
that's-
right?
That means the people of the dead, right? In Hebrew tongue.
Well, it has a few different meanings, but the Rephaim are post-Diluvian giants, and here's how it connects to the dead. So you have 7495 in the Greek, not in the Greek, in the Hebrew lexicon for the Old Testament, and that's Rapha, Rapha, and it means healer. And so you put that into a name, let's say, as an angel in the Apocrypha, Raphael. That means,
yeah, that's what I thought of.
means God heals or healer of God. But also understand Baal is in the occult, has names, and is thought to be equivalent to the loyal Raphael. And so he has names that have just different spellings as a counterfeit. But again, all angels have multiple names. Baal is being Lord God, Lord Master, Master of God, all sorts of different names. As the Al is the transliterated El, or an angel or a god. And so Rapha 7495 is the source word for 7497, which is the tribe of giants. And how do we know they're a tribe of giants? A, it's defined as that out of Hebrew. B, they show up as a tribe in Genesis 14 in the War of Giants.
Yeah.
And then they show up as a tribe in Genesis 15 in the land that's being promised to Abraham.
Yeah.
From the Nile to the Euphrates, and there's other giants in there and hybrid giants that are also listed in the Mighty Seven and the Mighty 10, as I like to group the additional triple K in there. So people look up Genesis 15, you'll see three tribes, K, and K. I won't tell you who they are off the top, but just to give you a little project to do. But what's also interesting is Rapha is used in a totality for giants 25 times. Where it says giant, it goes back to the Hebrew root 7497 Rapha.
Yeah.
And so Nephilim is only used 3 times.
Right.
And the difference is that the Rephaim are the post-Diluvian giants.
But they got giant thermal lakes in the middle of the earth.
Right?
Right.
And the Nephilim, even as they're described in Numbers 13:33 and the embellished
Good
part
for
of the
energy.
report, aren't really Nephilim because they're describing the Anakim kings, Sheshai, Talmai, and Ahiman, and the Anakim are described in Deuteronomy 2 as giants, but not as Nephilim, as Rephaim. The Bible is not in contradiction. What's going on here is the Israelites are testifying to the veracity of the larger and more powerful giants before the flood, and they're trying to terrify the rest of Israel, and they are successful in doing so, not to go into the covenant land to take on these monsters. Right. And so they embellish it. Not that they weren't giants; they were clearly giants, as other passages describe them, but they weren't the Nephilim. They were a little, they're smaller and less powerful. And that doesn't mean that, and so 7496 is the disembodied spirit word that is also sourced in 7495. And it can mean a demon spirit, an evil spirit, and it can also
spirit, wicked spirit.
And also translated as death, as it comes into English, as in the book of Job, where you have death and Rapha, and there's a couple other passages, and I'll note that in book 2 as well for people. So it's associated with death, as in disembodied spirits, and their spirits aren't sleeping.
Right.
Right? And they're all interconnected to give you the larger meaning. Now we get all of that put together in the Bible, but it's not really sort of connected. But if we go outside the Bible and we go to the Ugaritic text, which is written in the original Semitic languages, which was originally vowelless as Hebrew was originally vowelless, and it is the source language for Hebrew, we can make a lot of direct connections. And so the Baalim and Baal and Anat are in there as creating They're RPM as it's in the original Semitic, and it's transliterated into English in various translations as Rapiu or Rapium. And it's akin to when you see the Nephilim pronounced Nephilim with a P and without the H. It's that same sort of evolution of the language. So just as the Hebrew language evolved to putting in the vowels, it also evolved in that case with the P adding an H in some cases. And so some people are really technical on the language. You'll say, I don't care what Strong says, do not pronounce it Nephilim. It's still the old Nephilim, but Strong says it's pronounced as an F. And then you get, even out of Hebrew, you get F as being used instead of a PH. So in some of their things, so it's, don't get confused by that. It's the same sort of understanding. So they created after the flood the Rephaim, and their holy cities are Edrei and Ashtaroth. And if that sounds familiar, that's in the Bashan region at Mount Hermon, where King Og, the last of the giants, Rephaim in the male plural, ruled from. And there's even more connections there. So if they created these giants, and they're doing fertility rituals to create more Rephaim because they have a reproduction issue. It's not for necessarily fertility, it's producing less women. And it's going to require them to intermarry amongst humans otherwise they're going to go extinct. Yeah. So they're described as giants and mighty ones, and GBR Gabor is in there as well, also as a tribe of giants, although biblically you have to be careful not to assign mighty one to describing giants, because not all of David's men would have been qualified to be giants because they're Israelites. Right. So yes, you might have a hybrid like Uriah the Hittite or a Makathim, as I identify in Book 2 as a giant tribe, and no patriarch listed in the Table of Nations. You qualify them as hybrid or Rephaim. So you want to be careful with that. But there is a tribe that's called the Gibborim in the Ugaritic text, and it's also used as mighty one as well.
Yeah, mighty man of valor back in Genesis 6.
Yeah. Now these Rephaim kings and their assembly of the Tanu, the assembly of giants at Mount Hermon, where the assembly of the Baalim are, that is talked about biblically. These are described as giants, as we just talked about, and as dynastic kings, just as the royals are, kings of God, as you take that back on its etymology. Just as Ael's, that transliteration of El, in Book 1, I call them Rex Deus, which is the Latin term for the same meaning. And you have them as giants, you have them as dynastic kings, and you have them as healers.
Wow.
And the word healer is not used just to heal others, but to heal themselves. So they had this ability, whether it's technology or part of the DNA, they were.
See, I only learned that recently, that they had the ability to heal themselves. That's where the X-Men get it from, I bet. So they can heal themselves, and that's why David had to chop off Goliath's head so he didn't heal himself. That makes a lot of sense, doesn't it?
Very hard to kill. That's why you have to behead the giant.
That sounds familiar, and all the depictings of Hollywood and all that stuff with your Wolverines and stuff.
Yeah. So now what's interesting.
Yeah, I just mentioned Wolverine and the X-Men.
Oh, the Rephaim that are described as the exact descriptions and same types of kings, just as the Ugaritic text actually goes.
Hey, Shawnee, good night.
Arit, which is the Hebrew word for the terrible ones that I talked about in Ezekiel 32.
Right.
And Og. That was probably the original city of King Og, who likely moves over to Mount Hermon after the War of Giants, after most of the Rephaim are wiped out, and rules over Amorites after that war. And one of the reasons why he's called the last of the Rephaim, right? So everything starts to fit sort of biblically, and rules from the cities of Baal and Anat.
Cities,
yeah. Well, he had 12 Pentapoli, 60 cities over his kingdom that the Israelites had to take on. And so we also get a description of Baal as a bull. and the Balim as bulls, just as Molech would be depicted as a bull. But their offspring were also called bulls. And so when we look at the term Nephilim, people will say, well, some of the terms are bull and tyrant. Well, of course, that's part of the full meaning. They were called bullies. That's where the word bully comes from. Yeah.
Yeah.
And tyrant goes back to the Gyges and the Gyes kings that were bloodline after the flood and similar before the flood, but after the flood accountings has that Herculides bloodline or Zeus's bloodline of giants in Greek mythology that produced dynastic kings around Greece and in the Middle East as well. And so they were called in the Assyrian area of the Middle East and in the Anatolian or the Hittite area as tyrannos, as these dynastic giant kings that come from Zeus and alchemy, a human female after the flood, to produce Hercules in this dynastic level of kings. And so Tarwanos, with a T-A-R spelling, would be the Anatolian version of the same thing for the Indo-Aryan kings, which were giants, as I explained in detail, and I make a lot of connections too in book one.
So on that thought, if you guys are listening to the encyclopedia and wealth of information that Gary has invested into these books, I encourage you to get one. Challenge yourself, challenge your thinking, and dive into it for yourself. Like you said, he has the research to back it up. He's not just talking out of some Lululand or something that he's fascinated with. God put him on this mission, I feel, and he's revealed a lot of stuff.
100%.
I look forward to getting book 2 for my library as well.
Now, the word for the lords of the Philistines, as the Seranim, as you take that back to Hebrew, has an etymology back to these tyrannos. And so the Philistines weren't giants, they were hybrid giants, but they intermarried with giants and many giant nations that came with them when they expropriated Gaza in about, say, 1550 BC, and were one of the more powerful nations with their Pentapholes and military complex that they set up. So that word goes back to the Philistines. It's an insertion into Hebrew with an etymology that goes back to Greek, to tyrannos, through the Philistines, through Crete, and to the Indo-Aryans as the word, Sar or Saran, also meaning prince, that interweaves in there. And so these were tyrants and bloodline kings of the giants again that show up in the Philistines. And so I make a little connection there in book 2, and I use other sources, or book 1 and then use other sources. In book 2, I show you the whole etymology, taking it back. So
the Hittites and the Jebusites and all the ites, right?
So don't let people tell you that the word Nephilim, all the terms don't refer to giants. All the words that are listed there describe the giants. That's where they're sourced from. And so then people say, well, it doesn't really mean giant. But you just have to stand in there and you have to sort of answer some of those questions. So of course there were giants. And that word, some people will say, well, giant doesn't mean giant, means earthborn. Well, how do you get there? Well, through gigantic. Well,
Diane, that's part of the disclosure, I reckon. The alien disclosure.
Story. Gigantic is rooted in Gygus, singular, with the E epsilon, the E epsilon letter changes the G to a Y, or dies or diges, and in the plural, giantes or gigantes, as the word comes from Greek. So it sources through giantes, as we get the pronunciation of giant is plural, and from Gygus and Gyes as its source word. So again, it means giant, and they're also earthborn because they come from human females.
Hence
in
the mingling of the DNA. Yeah,
the full meaning of the word again. And again, watch out for people, whether it's eschatology or anything that they do, doctrine or prehistory, if they have to ignore certain aspects, that's a red flag.
Yes.
they like to leave out inconvenient passages or inconvenient
Or just gloss
information.
over them, like, oh, that's what happened there, and moving on.
Yeah, so,
So wait,
and then people
what?
say, okay, so the word's fine, but they still weren't like these large people. They were like 7 feet tall. Well, not quite true. So biblically, we get Goliath, who is a son of the giants,
Right.
Rapha.
Yeah, right.
And some people say that was the father's name, but it's also the tribe of giants, and it could be a generic name for giants as it's used. You have to watch the application. And don't just pick because Hebrew words and Greek words have a lot of different meanings. Don't pick, if you're going to take it back to Hebrew and Greek, which I encourage, don't be selective with biases. Pick the right meaning that doesn't conflict with the sentence it's in, the verse it's in, the narrative it's in, or any other passage in the Bible. Yes, it's a tough standard, but that's what you have to do.
And it's so much easier nowadays. We have it so much easier than having to have big lexicons and concordances and taking your time looking up. You got to write at your fingertips.
Yeah. And so Goliath is 6 cubits and a span. Well, and I make the case in book 1 and in book 2, I really nail it down that he would be a king and measured on a 21-inch cubit versus a standard 18-inch cubit. And Josephus says to measure the giants on a royal 21-inch cubit as well, because they were all the royals, all the nobility class. And so 6 cubits and a span would make him 11 feet 3 inches. And even if you use the shorter one, he'd be 9 feet 9 inches.
Right.
And he was described as stout. That's one of the significant words that are used that I really flesh out in book 2 is that word stout. It means muscularly wide, not flabby and fat. So it's
like a huge Doug fir, hundreds of years old.
Yeah. So Og's bed was left on display for future generations in Rabbah for that the future generations would know the size of the people that they bought. And it was an iron bed.
Yeah.
Because wood would not hold his weight.
Nope.
And it was 9 cubits long and 4 cubits wide. He was the king of Edrei and Ashtaroth. So clearly he's a king, just as I think Goliath was the king of Gath and was replaced by another king after Ashish, as I recall his name was, after Goliath was killed. And so that bed would have been close to 16 feet long on a royal cubit and 7 feet wide. So, and that is a 2-to-1 height to width ratio that they also wanted to have people remember, because the giants were extremely wide and muscular. The average height to width ratio of a human is 3-to-1, not 2-to-1. So more than twice the size, approaching 3 times the size from the biblical account. So for him to fit in his bed, minimum 12 feet, he's going to be minimum 12 feet. It could be 11 feet, but now it's a really oversized bed, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But more likely he's going to be 13, 14 feet tall, maybe 14 and a half, maybe 15 feet tall to fit in. And he's going to be 4, 5, or 6 feet wide.
Thousands of pounds.
Yes, thousands of pounds.
Iron to hold you up.
Yeah. Now, we get giants, let's say like Orontes or Achilles, which would be about 12 feet tall in post-Diluvian giants, and their second incursion of giants, created after the flood as well. In the Ugaritic texts and in the Epic of Gilgamesh and other languages recording Gilgamesh, they record him as 11 cubits tall and 4 cubits wide. So he'd be 19 feet tall as king of Uruk, 6th generation after the flood, and almost 7 feet wide, but would be 7 feet wide on a royal cubit.
Well, yeah, and what about all the bones that they've been finding? And I mean, they're way taller than that even. There's some that are taller than that.
Yeah, which I think the antediluvian giants or the post-Diluvian giants were larger because there were some sort of restrictions that were put on after Genesis 6:3, and God knew that their giants would show up after the flood. He knew everything was going to happen. So whether they survived, or I think what fits better biblically is a second creation, particularly with accounts all around the world that there was a second creation. And we have the Ugaritic text that lines up perfectly, and why the Bible distinguishes Rephaim from Nephilim.
Yeah,
lots
and
of
so-
sort of, yeah.
And can I ask you a question about that
Yeah.
now, being in common day and with all of the DNA manipulation and all of the things they've been working on for a very long time? I
Yeah.
think they've perfected it to make them look more like us now in a physical frame.
Oh, I
Do
think
you have
that's
any-
part of it. I think that's part of it, but also remember that there was this inability to reproduce, which is why they want to bring Baal and Anat back to create more Rephaim. And of course, the other question is where are they trying to bring him back from? Of course, he's killed in the Uyghur text, but you can't kill something immortal.
Right.
So they did the same crimes as his father El did and Ashtaroth did. They created Nephilim before the flood. Baalim and Anat created Rephaim after the flood, sometime before Babel. And those are the people that, in the Babel dispersion, the humans moved and lived amongst. And of course, the Canaanites moved in and with the Rephaim in the covenant land. And so they're gone and they're in the pit prison. So it's important to understand that these giants were not only just created again after the flood in like manner as was done as Genesis 6:4 talks about, but it makes more perfect sense as to why we're being familiarized with the Baalim gods in the Bible versus some of the other ones, because those are the ones that are appropriate to the commonality of the story. And that this fertility issue is also rooted in the word for terrible one, Arit, where it gives all these descriptions like stout for these giants and stuff like that, but also childless and some sort of fertility issue.
Yeah.
And so they're not to go extinct, they have to intermarry with humans. And that's where hybrids come from.
That's where you get the specific bloodline families.
Yeah. So when you have like Timnah marrying Amalek, that I cover a lot in book 1, and it really is something that if you want to focus a little more on for the hybrids in book 2, it's one of those cases to look like. And I'll identify in book 1 very curious tribes that don't go back to the Table of Nations.
Yeah.
Right? And so Timnah is the daughter of Seir, a Horim giant, as Deuteronomy 2 describes them. And Timnah marries Eliphaz, son of Esau, brother of Jacob.
Wow.
And they produce Amalek.
There you go.
And he is named eponymously after the Amalekim that show up in Genesis 14. Remember, this is Genesis 36 and 100 of years later,
Right.
a few hundred years later. And that they go and they live amongst the Amalekim in Petra. And that's one of the reasons why they're married there. But that's a hybrid tribe.
Yeah.
That are part of the taller people that the evil report in Genesis 13:33 is talking about. The Amalekites are included. And then repeated again with those people that are taller, and the Amorites, it's the same story 40 years later in Deuteronomy 1. So we have a full accounting of the accuracy of what's accurate in the report. But the Bible doesn't leave these things to chance.
Yeah,
People
that's
like
so
to ignore the
crazy.
inconvenient passages. So who else is listed in some of those hybrids that are taller but are different than the Anakim, as in the kings that are listed, Sheshai, Ahiman, and Talmai? Well, you have the Canaanites.
Wow.
And you have the Hittites. And you
Yeah.
have the Amorites. And
All the
these
heights.
the heights. And
Yeah.
if you look in the Table of Nations under Canaan, he has 2 sons, Heth and Sidon. So we know Canaan is the offspring of Ham, and Heth and Sidon are obviously the sons of Canaan. But we don't get a patriarch for the Amorites. We don't get a patriarch for the Jebusites. 9 of them we don't get patriarchs for. Well, that's a rather mystery. They're the only ones in the Table of Nations in Genesis 10, and accepting that Genesis 36 is done, I think, to help us understand as an addition to the Table of Nations, but not to be confused with the 70 sons of Noah, right? Or the 70 descendants or patriarchs of Noah.
Yeah.
And so you get these 9 patriarchless tribes that are unaccounted for. Well, who else is a patriarch that we get biblically that may not be in the Bible? Well, there's a fellow named Arba, who is the patriarch of the Anakim in the book of Joshua, who's not listed in the table of nations. Why? He's a Rephaim. Who else might we have?
Larry. Wayne would have to be the biggest expert on this sort of stuff. He's got to be.
As well as you dig into the Rapha name, it can
Billy's
be
called him Larry.
understood as, in terms of the giant, as a specific generic name for giants in general. It can be a name of a giant. It can be the patriarch of the giants. And it can be understood depending on the context. But as the patriarch, that means he started the tribe of giants, right? And that tribe, as they're listed in Genesis 15 and 14, are the eponymous name of the tribe taken after the patriarch. And patriarchically, Rapha would come from one of the other names of Baal that we talked about, a variation of Raphael. Or Raphael would probably, with the single P, would be more accurately in that spelling. But
yeah, and that's funny because that's all Satan has and his minions. It's like they have just cheap tricks, what I call cheap tricks and counterfeits, because they can't create. So it's all, that's so cool that you brought that up about Rapha and Raphael. And
yeah. So, and most of this information I'm talking about is all in the Bible, but you can, where you find stuff outside of the Bible and it lines up perfectly, probably
tell you
makes
something.
sense. Yeah, that not all of the biases of influence, that there is some fact within their biases. So now, if you want to look at then how this affects sort of downstream with all of this intermarriage, is they have to continue to intermarry, because if they keep that too tight within 4 separations, they get blood disease. And like hemophiliac disease, or more appropriate to the Royale would be the Habsburg jaw disease, right? So they have to keep bringing in further outside bloodlines to prevent these specific diseases from entering in. And so
very, very, very selective.
Yeah. So over time, you get this dilution of the original DNA, the genes that they would call as the gene of Isis, from the matriarchal bloodline that continues and passes on the bloodline from that. I don't put it in the book, but I think it's Rh negative bloodline that's associated with that. And it's the gene that is the introduction into humans that provides for the missing blood type that has a missing antigen. Otherwise, you just can't have a bloodline being added if you just keep it to blood when it's missing something. You can't add what's not there.
Right.
But
then that can go into the quest of them looking for all of these mighty men's bodies and the DNA research.
Absolutely, it does.
All the crazy stuff, like the real reason why we went to Iraq here in America and the government.
Yeah, and I've got a document I can send you where you have the links to the email that Clinton was looking for after she was Secretary of State, for the tomb of Gilgamesh that they discovered there, and for DNA, and for likely the sarcophagus and possibly the technology. So I have that if people want it. It's not just, and it goes right to the government archive. Yeah, it goes right to the archives of the government. So
it's not conspiracy.
Yeah, I like the verify.
Well, there's a conspiracy there, but there ain't no theory there. It's a conspiracy, right? Because conspiracy just means two one or more people plotting something. That's like
and biblically we understand conspiracy in Hebrew as an unlawful alliance and manifested in a confederacy and a conspiracy to commit treason.
Something not good.
So a group of people doing it. So we're warned about these conspirators in the Bible. So of course the spurious ones are going to say, it's a conspiracy theory and make it as a bad thing. Well, no, it's what they're doing. They're projecting on other people.
Programming you how to think it and how to view it.
Yeah. So now if you want to look at that dilution, I would encourage people to look at Akhenaten of the Pharaoh dynasty, and that's part of the King Tut museums that go around. You can Google Akhenaten, and that's 1,000 years after the flood. Now, with the Akhenaten bloodline, it's a very, very important and noble bloodline 1,000 years after the flood in the royal bloodline. That's why it's so famous and front and center. I mean,
Akhenaten?
Akhenaten. Yeah.
Wow.
He changed his name, had Amenhotep was his name before he converted to worshiping Aten as the main god. So they just, again, different titles and names for the kings.
Yeah.
So where I'm going with this is that understand that word sons of God and watcher, connect this back to the dilution of the bloodlines. And so people say, wow, you're going back to the book of Enoch. Okay, well, let's go biblically first. We have sons of God, and they're sons of God. They're angels in the book of Enoch, and we've talked about them as being angels in the Bible. And we also have the word watcher in the Bible, in Daniel 4 times. And it's the Hebrew word Ayer, and it's the second part of the word Sair, which produces the transliterated satyr for the devil goat gods.
Wow.
These are degraded watchers. As you pull that together. Again, stuff I talk about in book 2. The book 2 is written for Christians.
Right.
Specifically everything that's in the Bible that they need to know about prehistory and start to put that into end time prophecy.
Yeah, put the pieces together.
Yeah, so in Daniel 4, the watchers come from the throne of God, and they're dealing with religion and governance. And there's a order of angels that look after this. One, and we get a description of them as governing the laws in Daniel 4 and in Isaiah 6 as being the ministers of God working in the fiery stones before God at the altar, in the altar. These are seraphim angels. And seraphim, seraph is the plural, seraphim is the I am ones plural, as in Nephilim or Rephaim is giant ones. And these are serpent-faced, six-winged dragons or serpents and angels. And so if they took that form, that physical form, those traits would be passed on. And that's why you have, with the gods that are represented around the world,
I was just going to say,
serpentine imagery.
with feathers, the snakes with wings and
the plumed serpent, and the Nagas, the dragon creator god, Osiris, Zeus, Anki, and most of the gods running the earth are seraphim, right? They're fallen seraphim, and they're watchers. There's 4 groups of watchers: Ophanim, Cherubim, and seraphim, and archangels. And in book 2, I rearranged the standard Dionysius is hierarchy, because archangels come from the presence of God, so they have to be part of the top order. It sort of makes sense. So
just how it lines up.
Yeah. So again, I don't like to have things that are inconsistent, so I like to dig deep into them. So anyways, the kings before the flood and after the flood, and as depicted on reliefs, as depicted on statues, and as described in their writings, were called serpents. They look just like their procreators because that DNA was passed on.
Right.
And long-necked. And so
long-necked and
and wouldn't be a long skinny neck. It would be a wide neck. It's along with that understanding of the stoutness. So if you look at a pharaoh headpiece, it has this cobra wide neck look to it. That's representing.
And then what does it have up here on it? It's a little snake most of the time.
Yeah, a snake. Yeah, there's snake imagery all around it. And both Anakim and Og have a meaning that goes back to long neck. So a long, thick neck that they would have had. And that's depicted in these headdresses that would cover this elongated monster skull. And some pictures you get of the pharaohs with these elongated skulls without it, but typically they got a hat
Or their
on
hats,
to cover it.
Yeah.
And And what you can't do with finding a skull is create larger volume. You just have the same volume, but it's skinnier. And you can't make the sutures disappear. Right? So these are distinct. And so if you look at now Akhenaten on a picture, if somebody Googles it, you're going to see this serpentine face with this elongated skull. And so you have this long protruding chin, these very high cheekbones. And notice that models, they want to have very high cheekbones and certain things about the eyes. That's because they want them to be fair, because that's what was thought of as beauty within the royales, fair, pale white skins that the giants have. And blonde hair and red hair was also prized. That's where the color hairs of most of the giants. There is a dark-haired variety as well that includes Gilgamesh, but that's a rabbit hole I don't want to go down at this point in time. There's always more doors to open. And so
I'm curious.
Then you have these large wraparound eyes, and those eyes would have shone because they're called the shining ones. It would light up a room. And then these deep voices. So if you Google Akhenaten, you're going to see a diluted serpentine face that is over 1,000 years old after the flood and after the second creation of the giants. And understand that that's part of the serpentine nature, part of that serpent seed that's talked about as a curse and a prophecy in Genesis 3:15 that gets produced with the giants in Genesis 6. That's the evil seed line that we're going to be fighting as the visible ones, as well as the invisible ones, and that we also, fight flesh and blood. That's the spurious ones again, as well as those dark angels or those angels in high places that we're fighting, the fallen ones in the council of the gods and things. And so we need to understand that there's a seed line here that we're dealing against that is trying to wipe us from the face of the earth. And I make the case that part of the technology that was provided by the angels that merged with the seven sciences took the antediluvian world to a level of technology that we're just catching up to today.
Yeah, exactly.
And that means with the violence that they had, when you apply that to the violence, then they were on the precipice of completely destroying humankind from the face of the earth. Thus comes the flood.
Yeah, thus comes a flood, and it talks about Noah being perfect in his generations.
Yes.
Where do we get that word from?
Yeah.
That wasn't talking about his integrity or his stature with
his
God.
Genealogy.
Yes, it's genealogy, because right after that it talks about a devout man or a righteous man of God.
Yeah, so perfect in spirit, perfect in body.
Original creation, yeah.
Yes, so we need to understand it. And also we see technology reflected in the word the earth was corrupted. So that's the Hebrew word shakah. And it's just the earth, not sea, where everything's been corrupted. So that means if everything is corrupted, the DNA is corrupted.
Yep.
In the plant genomes. And if that's the case, then it answers the question. And that word means to decay, pervert, ruin, destroy in Hebrew. Something corrupted everything. It's the angelic technology and the things that are going on. And so it needed to be replaced. And that answers the question why God calls every kind or representative of the species to the ark, because they're not DNA manipulated.
Right.
The ones he calls.
Yeah, he knows.
Yeah, everything just starts to fall into place when you have a fuller understanding of things. And so it's this technology that is another key thing that we need to sort of understand that is associated with before the flood and what's going to happen in the days of Noah. If you like the days of Noah in that larger context that includes the violence. Who caused the violence? It's the giants.
Yeah.
And who ruined the earth? The giants did. They are the ones that get the blood on their hands. So the fallen angels don't have to do it. Yeah.
All that stuff. It comes from them. Imagine those sizes that Gary was talking about.
Yeah.
How much do you need to sustain that body to fill it? And they literally ate out cities and then started eating the people because there was nothing else left to eat. I mean, Yeah.
Yeah. And if you line up the days of Noah with learning everything about the days of Noah, when you assume that, you assume the violence, but did you assume giants and violence together?
Yeah, what a bunch of hypocrites, Diane.
Because it's going to be like the days of Noah. Did you?
Prince Harry flies on jets, gets a lend of people's jets, Elton John's jet to go and fly across the country, and he don't worry about climate change then, does he?
Did you imagine
They're
the
all
DNA
frauds.
manipulation and the plant genome manipulation? Well, wait a minute. We're doing all of that technology today.
And the
Still
animals
advancing.
and
Yeah.
everything on
And
the
it's
land,
gonna-
like you said.
And it's going to be like the days of Noah. And those are the exact same words translated, written down into Greek, into English, as what went from Hebrew into English in Genesis 9:29, the days of Noah. And his days were, as a generation, 600 years before the flood, 350 years after the flood. There were gods ruling before the flood, that Deuteronomy 32 talks about, over the 70 nations, and ruling after the flood. There were giants before the flood, there were giants after the flood. You had this universal Enochian mysticism after the flood. You get that reintroduced at Babel, which is the Babylon religion that's coming again, and is the Babylon religion, or the daughter of Babylon, as the Bible describes about it, with the beast empires that's coming again.
Oh, it's here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we need to understand that generation. And I'm not saying that that generation is 600 years or 650 years. Biblically, we get 40 years in the time of the wilderness.
Yeah, either 40
70
or
years,
70.
yeah, 70 in the book of Psalms. But because of the Noah reference, life was limited to 120 years in Genesis 6:3. It may be that one. So we have to be open that if indeed we're in the fig tree generation, and then the days or generation of Noah, and I take that back to generation as well in the language in book 2, then we
what
have to.
Yeshua said about this generation shall by no means pass.
Yes.
Heaven and earth will fall away.
Will fall away, but his words will not. Absolutely. And so we want to be careful with end time chronology. What starts it, and then not go beyond the possibilities that whatever date that you're using, you need to factor those three in. And Christians, we cannot lose our credibility on prophecy. Just when the world is going to need us the most, if indeed we're in the fig tree generation, and I think we are, then we better have it right. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people that
Well, first thing
I think
Jesus
get ahead of
says,
themselves.
the first thing Jesus says about the end times to all of us, take heed that nobody deceives you. Well, the first thing that tells me is there's going to be a lot of people trying to deceive me.
Yeah.
And he talks about many false prophets.
Yeah. And even the elect will be deceived.
Yeah.
Yes. And the other thing is in terms of his coming back, he doesn't even know the exact hour.
No.
Only
the Father.
Only the Father.
Yeah, and so he charges us to know the seasons, but like you said, the exact day and hour, no one knows.
Yes.
But we're called to know the season.
Yeah. So when people are saying we know when the rapture is going to happen by the day or whatever,
yeah, or whether he's going to come take us up before it all happens, or mid or post and all that. I look at it very logically. A long time ago, I was like, well, I'm going to prepare for the worst and hope for the best and do all I can in his will now. Because if I'm prepared for the worst and he comes before that, I'm not going to be upset.
You have no worries.
I'm not going to be like, why did you come back now?
But you do have to recognize the season so that you're prepared to look up.
Yes, yeah,
Because your redemption draws nigh.
But I never could see how a great falling away would happen. This was probably like 20 years ago, and I was just studying it up for myself, and I was like, oh, that's how I could see a great falling away. If I'm expecting Jesus to come right before the worst time the world's ever seen, and he doesn't come, where does that leave my faith?
Yes,
it'll shatter that time.
It will shatter a lot, and that's why in book 1 I have a chapter I call the Rapture Tragedy.
Yeah.
If they have the timing wrong, how many people will lose their faith because of that? So again, we want to make sure we we get it right and how we talk about it. And yes, that's exactly what I tell people is I believe it's mid-trib, a little bit after, but what I do is I hope for pre-trib, that I prepare for mid-trib or later.
Well, I'll tell people my opinions, but one of my favorite sayings is, "Hey, nobody in heaven's asking my opinion."
Yeah. Well, and and I get just inundated with people on signs and stuff.
Oh,
We had the great eclipse. It's just another eclipse, but that this is going to be a sign of the end time. And it's part of the 3 days of darkness. It's just endless.
Yeah,
and,
no, it's
we
distraction and call to fear. Distraction and call to fear.
Yeah,
they want to generate that.
And what they're doing within the Christian community with people in Christianity that are repeating these scare things is we're losing our credibility. I'm not saying there's not going to be signs and wonders for Christians in the end time to take note of, but we're going to be able to identify it.
Yeah, nobody's going to be able to deny it.
Yeah, so this is just something that happens with the laws that God put in place in his creation.
Yeah, and
it's wondrous. I mean, know that it's spectacular, and as looking around, we can see these things are created by God. That you have to have a moon to have life here. It has to be 400 times closer to the Earth than the sun in the math to be perfectly blocked out, and that the sun is 400 times bigger than the moon. Another coincidence.
Well,
that's just all. But here's my point: is that if it's going to be something celestial, we're going to know it as what it is because of how it defies the laws of creation. So it would be like the sun standing still.
Yeah, miraculous.
Yeah, with Joshua. So
there's no debate about it.
Yeah, it's going to be the earthquake and the darkness at the crucifixion. It's going to be like stars working out of their normal orbit together for the star of Jesus. It's going to be preternatural in a way that can only come from God. That's how you're going to know the signs.
Yeah, and I feel more of those signs because they are signs, right? But I think they're signs to awaken more of his children, and they're signs and warnings to the evil ones here that I'm still coming. Get ready.
Yeah, exactly.
Remember who really rules on high. But that's so amazing. You're going to be well received here because my channel's called Get Closer, and my ministry focus is all about helping children of God understand their authority in Christ Jesus, seated with him in the heavenly places and taking our dominion here in earth, but to experience him for yourself, to not just, listen to anybody, research it all for yourself, and to begin turning your word into prayer dialogue with God and asking for his Holy Spirit to show you things.
Yeah.
And researching stuff for yourself and having a spiritual experience for yourself.
That's one of the same message I like to provide is would I love non-Christians to hear what I say and read the Bible? Absolutely. But I love Christians who haven't been taught any of this to want to dig deeper into the Bible. Absolutely. That's what I want. I'm not here to convert people. I'm only here to give you information and to encourage you to fully understand why you believe what you believe.
Yeah, exactly. Because there's a reason behind it. And do you even know the reason, or is it just something that you grew up with, or something you were constantly taught over and over again? And do you want to maybe look at things differently and just be prayerful about it so you're not misled?
Yeah, and if we are indeed in the end times, in the victory generation, then our churches we can't rely on. And I think we saw, and I hate to be hard on the church because I'm not here to divide Christians, but if their performance in the pestilence that was here will be any indication of how they're going to be part of the world in its wisdom.
Hey, Darren, good to see you, mate.
You can see that apostasy coming full fold, and it's going to, as Jesus describes, a family against family turning each other in. It's
Yeah.
not going to be pleasant. So we need to prepare, and we need to try and plant seeds with people to say,
Mhm.
hey, if you don't think something's not right with the world right now, that something's off from what it was, you have seen nothing yet.
Yet.
And you are not going to be able to imagine what is coming.
Right.
And the only way you're going to be able to prepare yourselves is to learn about the Bible.
Learn and taste and know for
Yeah.
yourself. Have those
Yeah.
experiences for yourself now in Him.
And the only two things that God and Jesus promise us, He doesn't promise that we won't go through tribulation.
Right.
In fact, we're told we're going to go through tribulation.
Yes.
And what we are promised is that we're going to be saved from two things: the wrath, because it's not for the righteous.
Nope. Yeah.
So that's the year of the Lord's wrath. That is the last year. And secondly, the hour of trial, hour of temptation. Because even the elect would be deceived. And so
unless those days were shortened, no flesh would be left alive.
Yeah. And so that's why we're saved from the wrath of God, because that's what the point where Jesus comes back, I think, for his third time, is for the Armageddon battle, so that not everything is going to be completely destroyed, so that you can have a millennium and people surviving into it. So now, I think that hour of trial, as it's talked about in the 7 churches in Revelation, is the same hour. Hora is the Greek word, that's in Revelation 17. The hour, Hora, that the 10 kings of the 7th empire hand their power over to Antichrist to destroy Babylon, whom the 10 kings grow to hate, because it controls them and grows. They don't get all the wealth. Babylon does. So, and that's the same hour that's described for the destruction of Babylon in the summary of the last 3.5 years in Revelation 14. And I think starting at about verse 7 or 8. And also the hour that Babylon is destroyed, in the details of that as the first major event in the last 3.5 years in Revelation 18. And that's and when you get the last times as the time of many antichrists showing up on the earth that the epistles of John are talking about, that last times is the Greek word hora as well. So, and Jesus talks about the hour, hora, that he's coming.
Yeah.
It's watchful. Watch for the patterns that the Bible uses, so that you can recognize and connect verses. And don't let people say you can't, because that's when you have to start just missing and reimagining verses. So,
good night, Phil. God bless, mate.
Take it out of context versus trying to connect it.
Yeah. People will tell you that you can't connect trumpets to the end time, other than the trumpets in Revelation. Old Testament, New Testament, if it's prophetic, if it's a prophecy, that trumpet's there to mark
twice. Yep.
Yeah. All you got to do is look at previous prophecies that's been fulfilled.
Yeah.
In Yeshua, and I mean, hello.
Yeah. And look for Jesus' sign that's talked about in the oration that he provides to Mark and Luke, or that Mark and Luke and Matthew record, to the same words that are used in the Old Testament, not necessarily for the church, but for the reconciliation of Judah and lost Israel. Because that's part of his coming, as in Hosea 9:7, in the days of his visitation, just as Luke talks about the days of the Son of Man, not singular, but days. He's coming for rapture, second Exodus, and Armageddon.
Yeah. And he's not going to be the Jesus everybody makes him out to be. He's going to be
when you see the word Israel, when you see prophecies, end time prophecies in the Old Testament that say banner, ensign, or standard, that's Jesus's sign. And you start to read those words in that context, and the best way you do it all goes back to the same Hebrew word. But understand, you start to connect how you can do Old Testament prophecies and connect with New Testament prophecies. Even though it's written in Greek versus Hebrew, there's cognate words that are in place that you can use. Like you have ellipses for tribulation. The
Wow.
tribulation of the saints in Revelation 7, or the Great Tribulation in Matthew 24:21, which is a separate from the tribulation of the saints. And unfortunately, we don't get good translations as well. So ellipses is translated before the abomination in Jesus' chronology as affliction. And it's also translated elsewhere as affliction. It's part of the meaning, but from a timing perspective, you have to understand that there's two tribulations. And so how I will produce now an example to show why you have to be careful with this is that in where it says in the Great Tribulation versus the tribulation of the saints that happens before the abomination, which is Revelation 7, which the ones in Revelation 6 are told to wait for to come out of the Great Tribulation, ellipses. Then you have the Great Tribulation of the world not seen since creation. It's distinctly different. And then in the cognate verse in Mark 13, where you get that same prophecy after the abomination, it doesn't say tribulation there. It's translated as affliction, and it's the same Greek word. And it's the cognate word for Sarah in Hebrew for the time of Jacob's quote-unquote trouble.
Great trouble, yeah.
And the kickoff to the second Exodus that Jacob is going to be saved out of. And busted out by the breaker by Jehovah for the second Exodus, as the book of Micah leaks into those passages. And that it's the same word that's used when Michael stands in the time of trouble, the time of the resurrection of the Jewish people, which is the midpoint of the last 7 years when Michael's also standing in Revelation 12, the battle with Satan and his angels after Antichrist has come to power. And Antichrist has come to power because in Daniel 8:10, he is going to try and raise his throne to heaven like Lucifer tried to do, or Satan tried to do. He's going to throw down some of the starry host after he comes to power.
Yeah.
It's the same battle, and it's the same time frame.
Yeah. So I'm a big proponent for going hard after this research, and your books are just so the knowledge that you have and that you compiled is so amazing, and that gives you a lot of context and a lot of stuff to research out for yourself. And I'm a big proponent of asking for Holy Spirit, because Yeshua said he is the great teacher. He is to teach you all things and bring in remembrance everything I said.
Yeah.
So, I mean, rely on him.
Pray for that extra support.
Yes.
So that's why book 2 has a little bit different subtitle to it. So the subtitle of book 1 is how the descendants of giants, how secret societies and the descendants of giants plan to enslave humankind.
Yeah.
Book 2 is called How Understanding Prehistory and Giants Helps to Define End Time Prophecy.
Wow, that's cool. I can't wait to get it. That's amazing. What I was gonna, go ahead.
I was going to say, so book 1 is as unique as book 2, but in a different way and targeted at Christians. So it's going to cover off things that no other book has covered off. It's as unique as book 1, and a lot of people like the work of Dr. Heiser. I've not read his work; I've only heard about it. But from the little I've seen for excerpts and what people have told me about it, this book 2 would be also Genesis 6 Conspiracy 1 on steroids for Christians, and it's not redundant. It's additional information, and it's mostly biblically based. And it would be Dr. Heiser on steroids. So when I talk about the application of ellipses or Hora or Rapha or Saba or any of those types of words that I've been sort of flashing around, you get that in book 2. You get the Christian information you need to check my veracity.
Well, yeah, and the cool thing about book 1 is that it's titled and laid out too. So if you only want to know, like, put a couple pieces together of this secret society or this giant group or this point in history, he's laid it out beautifully to where it's like subcontext all the way through, so you can just go right to that and learn about that if you want.
Yeah. So I'm going to take back, and as I give you information, the first section is just information Christians need to read the Bible in a larger context.
Yeah.
And it's just so important, but you don't have to read those, but you'll want to go back to read them. But as I move forward, I mean, I'm going to take all of these patriarchal stations that are listed in the Bible, and I'm going to take them back to a Rephaim patriarch.
Wow.
I'm going to give all the giant nations that I could identify, show you how we understand that these are giant nations, and take them back to a Rephaim patriarch as well.
Wow.
Then I'm going to go through with all that information on the angelic order, the information needed in one, all the different kinds of hybrids. 6 to 9 feet would be the hybrids, more 7 to 9 feet would be the general average, versus giants being taller.
Yeah, this is the kind of stuff you're not gonna get in a seminary school or going to somebody's theology lessons.
Yeah.
And
then I'm going to use that base of information to walk through the War of Giants in a way that I don't do in book 1, just
cool.
on steroids. And then I'm going to cover off all the different battles and campaigns of the Exodus Wars. So it starts with the Battle of Rephidim, the Battle of Hathornem 40 years later, the Eastern Campaign, the Central Campaign, the Northern Campaign, and the Mountain and Southern Campaign. Then I'm going to go into the book of Judges and show you how those wars are associated with Israel and the people attacking them are connected to giants, and show you where you get that information. Go through all of that through the book of Judges. Then I'm going to do the same thing in the wars of King Saul, the wars of King David, and the wars of King Solomon.
Yeah, wow. Yeah,
then I'm going to get into end-time prophecy.
Just from the and then if after that,
and some secret society stuff as I do the transition.
That's amazing, man. But yeah, the dudes, David's mighty men. Oh my goodness, they were no joke.
No, they
just
were.
Read about that in the Bible, and you'll be like, what? And and you'll see the offspring and the DNA manipulation and the lion men of Moab. And it makes sure telling you in the Bible, this is all Bible, people, it tells you about the guy who killed 2 lion-like men of Moab. And you can't describe them as, you can't make it seem like they were just lions, because right after that it says, and he killed a lion on a snowy day.
So I'm going to save it for book 4 on really getting detailed into that. Finish book 3. I do make some references to these different kinds of giants in book 2. So I would encourage people to look at Cherubim.
Cherubim?
Yeah. 4-faced
it's like,
angels.
What the heck? I can't imagine the job of John and Ezekiel and Isaiah and all these great men of faith that we had, our fathers of our faith, describing this stuff that they're experiencing and seeing in the heavens.
Yeah. So you have, and understand that these were watchers.
Right.
And
there's good watchers and, the fallen ones, right?
Yeah. So they had a human head. They had a face also of an ox or a bull. I would go for bull. It had a face of an eagle or a bird.
Yeah.
And face of a lion.
Yeah.
Now, one of the kings in the War of Giants, Arioch, means lion-like. Ari and Ariel is in lion and lion of God. Take that back to Hebrew. And there's an Avim god, a giant, one of the post-Diluvian giants, and they lived in different pockets. I'll give you ideas where these giants lived as well in book 2. And one of the areas was in the Mesopotamian region, and the Avim god worshipped a god named Nergal as the war god of the Sumerian pantheon. And he's depicted as a lion-faced god.
Wow.
And so I think, and you get lion-faced gods in most of the pantheons. The Egyptian has a number of them, whether it's Mahis or Bast and other ones, Sekhmet. So if they produced giants, they would produce ones that looked like them if they took the face of a lion.
Hmm.
So now if you can imagine that you have a eagle,
Right.
and you look at Anunnaki on relief in Sumeria, you have these winged creatures, really stocky legs and wide, like that sort of kind of a stoutness, but these are angelic beings. And they have wings, and they're depicted in two ways. One has a human's head, and one has an eagle's head, both of a cherubim, right?
Wow.
And so if they took a human's head, maybe that was the dark-haired variety that Gilgamesh in the Syrian giants and some of the Greek giants were produced by, and more warrior-like, as in the warrior gods, just as cherubim were like a warrior-like angels, just as they protected Eden with a flaming sword before the flood, after the ostracization of Adam and Eve. Yeah, and then if you look at the creatures that are described as gods and giants in Southeast Asia, Tengu gods, which are watcher gods like the seraphim gods and part of the same grouping of gods there, they're depicted as birds and serpents. So in this case, a cherubim taking one face. And they produce Tengu warriors and priests, Tengu. If people Google that, they're going to get these eagle-faced, bird-faced creatures. And in the Popol Vuh, these are the Xibalba demigods that had owl faces. And there's one particular one that's the House of Camazotz, as a branch of them. That's the House of the Bat. And you Google Camazotz and you get the outfit that Batman wears. But
Wow.
so, and when cherubim took an image on the earth, they would generally only take one face. So if you see a sphinx, it's going to have one face, whether it's a human or a lion's face. If you look at the caribs, which are the same thing throughout the Middle East, they're going to have, a bull's face. They're going to have, one of the faces of the cherubim. They're the same angelic creature, and the gargoyles would be the bird face.
Wow. Yeah. Some kind of bird too.
Yeah, some kind of bird. So, in book 4, I'm going to look at
all of those are
ancient,
ancient symbolisms that you can find in every cult, like all the different ancient symbolisms in the cultures, from the coat of arms to the gods they worship. Yeah, all kinds of stuff. That's so interesting. I was going to ask you.
Just so we don't get this totally without some biblical support, and I won't spend a little time on this. So, along with that Avin god with the Nergal god, and this sort of takes it into another classification of gods. You have a god that the Avin worship that was named Nibaz, Nibaz. And you take that back to Hebrew, and it means a barking god. Wow. And it was depicted with a dog's head.
Whoa.
So now you start to get into
Mars, have you got Facebook?
And stuff like that. And you look at gods like Anubis, and we get references to jackals as gods.
Yeah, the old Shamara thing.
Yeah. That if they in there's so much historical.
Diane, someone's dropping things in your mail threatening you. You want to take that serious. I hope you got your little mate with you that sort of shoots.
Information on the dog warrior gods. Well, they're classified as lower than the other types of giants, and mostly were mercenaries. And so Anubis created so many of these giant warriors. He created a city for them called Sinopolis, as the Greeks called it. Opolis means city. Sino is their word for cynocephalus, for dog man.
Whoa.
Wow.
The dog man city.
Yeah. So they're all over the world as well too. So.
Yeah. So have you? I would wait and ask you. Have you heard about the Native American encounters here, just in America, North America, and with I think it was Wild Bill, who had one of the Old West guys. I can't remember if it was Wild Bill or if it was a different character along the same, very similar name. He was really good friends with natives, and they took him and showed him the caves about their ancient drawings, and showed him femur bones that were bigger, like as big as him. And then he has a diary that they've done away with, of depictions of him drawing stuff that was in the caves.
Wow.
And he had a dark-haired giant Rephaim looking scary dude with claws, having one buffalo in the hand and ripping off the other one.
That'd be Buffalo Bill. It wouldn't be Wild Bill Hickok, because Wild Bill Hickok, I don't think he was friends with the Indians, but Buffalo Bill was.
While he's running with the buffalo.
Gilgamesh, like in terms of the size,
Yeah, it
right?
was like,
so in the
whoa.
fiction, so
And they knew about this stuff, and that was like,
sure,
you know,
all
1800.
the First Nations in North America, Central America, South America talk about the giants.
Yep.
And the Hopi say that the original giants they understood them as the White Snake Clan that came from an island in Atlantis.
I take it serious, Diane.
And so
I'd have your
some of them
gun
were
close
some, but
by.
also you get these, red-haired ones, which is the more common one that's talked about. But yeah, and it's trouble is I didn't do a lot about Africa or First Nations. It was all oral traditions. You don't get anything sort of in writing for history. So, but I recognize that they're in all different cultures around the world, and I think the First Nations counting in there, like I say, it's little people, Sasquatch, Nephilim.
Well, I've heard the whole thing why they went like this, and they said how. They wanted to see if you had 6 fingers.
Yeah.
That's why they go how.
Yeah.
Like from afar. They're like,
Yep.
Do I need to get ready to kill you? Or
Yeah. And so there's been a lot of discoveries of these bones in North America, and the First Nations had a lot of wars against them to eliminate them, because you can't live with these tribes of giants that try and wipe you out.
Yeah.
So there's
It's actually written in one of them caves that the giants had, that they were refugees from that robber Joshua. So apparently they flew Joshua and went to America, because that's written in one of the caves. We fled from the robber Joshua.
a link that I have that if people want to get a hold of me, just send me a note, and it is old newspaper stories.
Diane, keep it close. Everyone's going crazy now. Keep your gun close.
So
send you an email for that.
yeah, and
You're already sending me stuff. So.
Yeah, well, list all of the stuff because I'll forget.
Amen, boss. Amen, bro.
Yeah, there's a lot of amazing information. Anyway.
And on this has a spreadsheet where it's going to give you descriptions and information sort of in summary on a spreadsheet. But as you scroll to the right on the Excel spreadsheet, it has a link to the newspaper story.
Oh, wow.
And you can go read it for yourself from the original, and it ranges from 1850 to about 1950 in North America. There's a few other ones in there from Mexico and a couple other places, but predominantly in the United States.
I'm surprised they still have those up. As good a job as they do trying to hide all
I know. So, so it's just one of those things to show you that there's a conspiracy. There's no way of getting around it to hide this information. So what happens with all of these discoveries in North America and all of these ones that are listed on the spreadsheet is that 2 things will happen once the discovery happens. A, the local university is going to be called. They're going to send their people out. They're going to pack it up, take it to the university, call the Smithsonian. They go.
Boss, I've got to admit, I'm not the type to turn the other cheek. I don't do that. You come after me, I'm going to be armed up, ready for you.
There, and then they're never seen again. Nor the more direct approach is whoever discovers it calls the Smithsonian directly. They come get it all,
and it's never seen again.
And it's never seen again.
They probably covered it up and done, who knows, dumped it in the ocean or kept it in their secret wherever they do with it.
Oh, you're saying wow about Joshua's fleeing from Joshua? Yeah, I said wow too.
Yeah, they have more stuff they try to hide than they'll ever be able to put in the Smithsonian.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, that's fascinating, man. Yeah, thanks for coming on. Hopefully we can get you on again.
Sure.
After I get a hold of a copy too and read that, and I'm looking forward to the other books you mentioned that you're working on. That's amazing, Gary.
Yeah. So.
Okay, thank you, Gary. That was a very good, interesting interview.
This one-of-a-kind plasma lighter is taking over the survival market in Australia. It's completely water and windproof and can start a fire in fractions of a second.
Last favorite channel.
Welcome to the Prophecy Club. I've got some real important information for you today. It is a big sign. I'm going to say one of the biggest signs I've seen in a long time that the Antichrist is soon to arrive. A big sign, the Antichrist is soon to arrive. And in light of this, he could be arriving, I'm guessing 24, but more like 25. And the closer we move towards 26 and 27, it's almost a certainty somewhere in there. We're going to see the Antichrist. Now, let me also tell you how to spot him real quickly. That's not.
No, Vas, the implication is they completely bailed out of the Middle East and went to America. And they're red-haired giants as well.
Part of the program. I'm just doing this off the top of my head. But first of all, there has to be a 10-nation confederacy in Europe. Then we're going to see a guy overcome 3 of those nations. So that means that he will take their place. So we'll see the 10-nation confederacy, 3 overcome, and then one. So we'll see that 10-nation confederacy become an 8-nation confederacy. So when there's a big war in Europe, where there's one of the nations that is fighting against the other nations, that's the guy to watch for. That's the guy that will probably be the Antichrist. All right, now let's.
Live.
We're asking people to subscribe and also click the bell, subscribe, and also join the Prophecy Club. $9.90 a month. It's not much, or more, of course. And you can do that very quickly and easily by just putting your phone up, like you're going to take a picture of the QR code in the bottom. It'll take you over there. $9.90 a month. We're asking people to join us. And frankly, you may be saying, why do I want to join the Prophecy Club? Well, God has told me, audible voice, confirmed it through Leslie in a dream, that he's going to give me thousands upon thousands of souls. Another dream, audible voice, I'm giving you part of the harvest from the seeds sown by Billy Graham. If you want to take part in that big harvest, when you're standing before Jesus up there, you want to be able to raise your hand and say, hey, I helped all of us souls come in through Prophecy Club. Then you want to join Prophecy Club. Okay, so I want to be able to say this is quick and easy, but this is not. It takes a little understanding. The more you understand Bible prophecy, the better you're going to get it. But the bigger the revelation, and this is a big one, the bigger the background has to be to understand it. Meaning, here's what it's probably going to go in this program. You're probably going to be going, so, get to the point. And then when I get to the point, you're going to say, wow, I got it. And you're going to get it. Not that complicated. All right, let's get started.
If you see the video clip now, you know that. If you see the video clip that Tainted Love, you'll understand why I said that, Vas. It's 100% about that. I can't say it out loud because the algorithms will get me.
I want you to look at this carefully because this is really big. What you're seeing has not happened in over 2,000 years. You're seeing 3 red heifers. Now, I know you probably already heard.
Amen, Darren. Amen, brother.
That's not the revelation. That's part of it. That has to do with it, but that's not the revelation. So, what is the revelation? Here's the background. So, you go to Numbers 19, and Moses and Aaron were told by God that they were to take a red heifer without spot, no blemish, upon which there would never come a yoke. In other words, so it had to be perfect. And they were to take that heifer without the camp. That's a key. Because, see, Jesus was crucified without the camp. He was taken outside the city. And when he brings the Russians and all of their other buddies there to attack Israel for Armageddon, they are taken without the camp. Because where Jesus' blood, where the blood of this heifer probably will be shed is probably
Where it
very
belongs.
close, maybe even within feet of where Jesus' blood was shed. And that's where he's going to shed the blood of all of his enemies at Armageddon. He's going to satiate his garments with their blood. So remember that the life is in the blood. And you remember that Cain's slew Abel, and Abel's blood was innocent blood crying out to him from the ground. So we can assume that the blood somehow is like a recording device for all of our sins. And it's by blood, the Bible says, that without the shedding of blood, there's no remission or removing of sins. So this is really, really a big deal. Now, so they take him outside the camp, and then the priest was told to take the blood of that red heifer, dip his finger in it, and sprinkle it before the tabernacle and the congregation 7 times. Same thing he was told when he said on the Day of Atonement, when they brought the 2 goats, the blood of the one goat went into a golden bowl.
Diane, I was still dancing in nightclubs when Tainted Love come out.
The angel or the high priest took that into the Holy of Holies on once a year, and dipped his finger into it and sprinkled it on the mercy seat eastward 7 times. So this is really, really big stuff. Now, he goes on to say, 1 person shall burn the heifer. And then he says, and then cedar wood, hyssop, and scarlet is tossed in on top of the burning heifer when it's burning. So I looked up, okay, cedar wood, okay, we understand. Cedar wood, I mean, you put that in a closet because moths don't like it. Okay, so it's an anti-bug thing. And then hyssop, we understand it's a weed that grows wild in Israel. And if you mix yourself a hyssop drink, it cleans like a white tornado. You think X-Lax is powerful, you ain't tried anything till you tried hyssop. I mean, I got some hyssop essential oil. I didn't know what it was. Well, I tried it. So I just put a drop on the back of my hand. About an hour later, I'm in the bathroom. So, I mean, it's real powerful stuff. So I looked up scarlet. So I thought, okay, so what's the big deal with scarlet? Well, actually, scarlet is talked about like 200 some odd times in the Bible. It's really big. Now, here's the point. Okay, so in this case, the first child came out, and so they wrapped a scarlet twine on the hand of the child that came out first. So scarlet in that case said that you are more blessed by having the scarlet. And then another place, it said that the high priest was to put scarlet along with the sacrifice of the 2 birds, alive and clean. So scarlet there was a cleanser. And then another place, the scarlet shall, I told you that story. The scripture says, Isaiah 1:18, though your sins be as scarlet, they should be white as snow. So scarlet is, and I looked it up. I looked up scarlet wood, I looked up scarlet plant, I looked at scarlet spices. I couldn't find anything about scarlet. So it's out there. I just couldn't find anything on the internet about it. I'm probably going to get some emails. Okay, this is what scarlet meant. Okay, it's probably a purifier, just like the other 2 things. That's the point I'm trying to make. Now, let's go on with what the scripture says. Okay, so a man that is clean shall gather the ashes of the heifer and lay them without the camp in a clean place. What they did was they made a vessel that they called a kalio. Now, I might not be pronouncing that right, and I'm going to have it written down here, and I'm probably not spelling right, so forgive me. But that kalio was made of the dung of the animal, and they put the ashes of the red heifer into it. And then, when they had to sacrifice, what they did is they took a straw, and they dipped it in those ashes, and then they sprinkled it upon the vats of purification. Remember, Jesus turned the water into wine, vats of purification. They're large vats. So a little bit of this ashes goes a long way. Then what they would do is take their hyssop again, remember, a wild weed that grows in Israel, and they dip the hyssop in the water, and they sprinkle that on the Sanhedrin, on the sacrifice, on the altar, on the temple, everything that has to be pure. But without the ashes of a red heifer, they can't have things purified, so they can't start animal sacrifice. Now let's go on. It says that an unclean person shall then take of the ashes of the burnt heifer and purification of sin, and dip it in running water. That's what it's saying. A clean person should take the hyssop, dip it in there, and sprinkle it on the tent, the vessel, all the things I said. And the clean person shall sprinkle on the unclean, and that makes them, essentially, that's what it's saying. It cleans them. Now, part of the motivation for Israel to give the Palestinians a state is probably in the agreement that says they'll give the Palestinians a state. What Israel wants is access to the Temple the Temple Mount. Why? Because they're going to start animal sacrifice. Well, how do we know they're going to start?
That's in my young days, guys, going to dances and picking up girls. That's in my younger days. I don't do that anymore.
Animal sacrifice. I'm so glad you asked. So let's jump to Daniel. We got 4 verses that say exactly that. Yeah, he magnified himself. This is the Antichrist. Even to the prince of the host. So he says he is God. That's Antichrist does not mean against Christ. It means in the place of Christ. That's what he wants to be. Remember, Lucifer wanted to sit in the throne of God, and he wants people to. So he sit in the throne of God, showing himself that he is God. That's what he wants. That is his crowning achievement, is to sit on the throne of God and get the world to worship him. That's where all of this is going. So when they say, well, I don't understand why Haley is not dropping out of the New Hampshire primary, I don't understand. They don't understand where it's really going because they don't understand Bible prophecy. They're saying, oh, well, they're trying to cause. No. The ultimate objective is to bring the Antichrist so he can sit on the golden chair of God, the throne of God, in the temple, proclaiming himself that he is God. And when he does that, the scripture says he will cause animal sacrifice to cease. Now, why would he cause animal sacrifice to cease? Because he's going to say, look, I am God. You don't have to sacrifice anymore. I'm here. Okay. So in the midst of the week, he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. What's the problem with that? Well, they aren't sacrificing animals in Israel anymore, and they have not done that for over 2,000 years. So this is really, really, really big. And the problem is this red heifer, these red heifers have not been, they every time there's something wrong with them.
Yeah.
There's a white hair they find, or there's a scratch on them or something.
Saw in excess for $4 at a pub in Campbelltown. That wasn't the pub I was talking about. That was when I was in the army, 1982, 81. I went to a pub in Campbelltown on a Thursday night, and it was in excess for $4.
They have been trying to get a red heifer for, again, over 2,000 years. Of course, they've been back in the land for what is almost 80 years. I can't get a red heifer. So bottom line is a bunch of Texas ranchers that had red cows flew 5 of them over to Israel. Now, this next article is about to say that's the real reason that.
That's when I saw in excess. They hadn't had any hits yet. They did release one single, but it was what do you say, a copy of another guy's song. So they never had original music back then.
Hamas.
This is 81 or something.
Because they were afraid they were going to get these 5 heifers. They get the 5 heifers, then they start animal sacrifice. If they are able to start the animal sacrifice, that means they're going to take over the temple area, and the Muslims have that right now. That also would mean that they're, at least their belief now, I disagree with it, but that's nevertheless their belief. They would then say, well, we got to tear down the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is, I think, the number 3 holy site in Islam, might be number 2. Anyway, let's read the article. Hamas spokesman blames Israel's importing of red heifers for October attack. It says the real motives, they're saying, for the October massacre, he said that the aggression was against our path, and Al-Aqsa reached its peaks with the bringing of the red cows. See, everybody has been thinking, well, they probably did this attack because they want a Palestinian state. I have not heard that one time, and you'd think it's out there a bunch, but I have not heard that in all the articles that you guys send me all of my later. I've not heard that. In other words, there's no Muslim saying we attacked Israel because we want a Palestinian state. This is the only explanation that I've heard offered. Got another one? Send it to me. Anyway, does the bringing of red cows, which was referring to the 2020 arrival, or excuse me, the 2022 arrival of 5 red heifers to the Temple Institute. Temple Institute. Well, that might just be the place, but maybe it's not the place where Jesus was born, where it is where the temple sacrifice animals, the lambs and the goats and the whatever it is, are raised in a special way so that they're not damaged, they're not blemished, so they can be used for sacrifice. Anyway, let's go back. 22 arrival of the 5 red heifers to the Temple Institute. The Jewish organization focused on establishing the third temple on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. Well, I think that they've got the wrong place for the Temple Mount, and I don't think they're going to be building a stone building. I think that they will pull out the original tabernacle that was made of lamb's wool. And I talked to Findle Jones that before he died, maybe, I don't know, 30, 35 years, maybe
Darren, did you get into the ecstasy being a raver?
40 years ago. He said that when he went into the chamber where he found the red dust, which they felt like was temple incense.
I remember New
he
Wave
said
rock
in
and
that
roll.
temple, he also found the tabernacle of Moses. And I said, well, wouldn't that be old and dilapidated, just fall apart in your hands like ash? He said, no, it's as good as the day as it was the day it's sent in there because it's made of lamb's wool. And he said, it's good. He believed that they would pull out the original tabernacle made and used by Moses some 3,500 years ago. And in those days, they would just lay it down on the ground. The Spirit of God entered into it and it just stood up by the power of God. Those kind of miracles we may be about to see. Now, there's a couple more things I need to say about this. Where these heifers are supposed to be born is in the specific area in Bethlehem where the animals for temple sacrifice are to be born. And like the lambs, they wrap them in swaddling clothes so it would restrict them so they would not scratch themselves or put a blemish on them. And that's why Jesus was wrapped in swaddling clothes, because he was born in the specific place where animals to be used for temple sacrifice are born. That's why he was wrapped in swaddling clothes. So, because fingernails on newborns are like razors, and they scratch their face all the time. If there's one scratch, it disqualifies them to be a sacrifice. Big, really, really big deal, right? And that's why Jesus was wrapped in swaddling clothes. That's why the Bible went to the trouble to tell us he was. Now let's go on. Well, it goes on to say the heifers are quietly being groomed by the Institute for their ultimate goal, which is to start animal sacrifice. So what you're seeing here is like really, really big. They have not sacrificed these animals yet, probably because they don't have a place to use their blood. But to me, I think this is another really, really, really big thing saying we're about to see the conclusion of this war with Hamas in Israel. Is probably going to give the Palestinians a state, and in that agreement, Israel will be able to pray at the Temple Mount, and they've not been able to do that in over 2,000 years. It will allow them to sacrifice the animal, use the ashes to purify the water, the hyssop, the wheat, sprinkle all the things that must.
Diane, Cold Chisel is probably Australia's biggest well-known band in Australia. They went to America in the early 80s to try and get involved in America and break the scene in America, but they couldn't work out a deal with the record executives. They demanded a bit too much. So to put it in the true words, Cold Chisel said, stick it up your bum, came back to Australia and just stayed in Australia. And they wrote a song about it. You got nothing I want, you got nothing I need. And it was aimed at the American record producers because they tried to jip them. And that ended up being a hit song as well. They probably got about 15 classics. They're very prolific.
Be cleansed and boom, they start animal sacrifice. That will be a big day in Israel. When you see that, one thing you can say is absolutely, positively, without question.
Well, they got attacked by demons on DMT. Yeah, that was pretty bad.
And we are in the tribulation.
Yeah,
We
we are.
are in the last
Yep,
7 years, no question.
yep, I agree.
Actually, I'm going to show you scripture here. Well, I think I backed up. I'll skip that for now. Let's go on. Back to the article. Securing a potential unblemished red heifer is the key to the first steps of restarting the temple service or sacrifice, which implies the removal of the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Omar building, rebuilding the temple, and ultimately the return of the Temple Mount to Jewish control, meaning starting animal sacrifice. The mere fact that all Jews would be able to ascend to Temple Mount would create pressure to resume services there and rebuild the temple. No. Be the reason they did it, okay? The current effort to rebuild the temple is not supported by Israel's government or universally supported within Judaism. In fact, the step toward performing the arcane red heifer ceremony doesn't just imply a return to the Holy Temple service. It points to the nearness of Moshe or Messiah, or the Mashiach, however you want to pronounce that, and the ultimate redemption of Israel. In other words, when they start animal sacrifice, this voice is going to be saying, without a question, we are in the tribulation. And we may, in fact, only have 120 to most 230 days, but probably more like 120 days until Jesus returns. So what's going on? So let me summarize this. The red heifer is taken outside the camp and sacrificed. It is a picture of Jesus being taken outside the camp and sacrificed on the cross. The ashes were then put into a kalil, which is made of the dung of the animal. Then they dipped a straw in, and whatever ashes, small amount of ashes, stuck to the straw. Then they sprinkled that over the vats of purification water. And that purified them. Then they took hyssop, dipped it in, and then sprinkled that on the Sanhedrin, the altar, the sacrifice, whatever they needed to purify in order to start animal sacrifice. Then the red heifer has not been seen. They've been trying to find one, been trying to grow one, couldn't, for over 2,000 years. Now, all of a sudden, when the Palestinians are about to be given a state, when there's just been war in Israel, now out there, they've got red heifers in Israel ready to sacrifice. I don't know if that's all approved yet or not, but they know. So it is supposed to be born in Bethlehem, where animals are raised and temple sacrifice. Apparently, that does not matter to the priest in Israel. Maybe they don't even know the place 2,000 years later. But the point is, if they sacrifice an animal, if they start animal sacrifice, we're at the door. And there's no more question. Absolutely there. And I will be screaming from the top of my voice. We are in the tribulation. We are, okay? Let me go on. So, I want you to try to get this picture. Try to get this revelation.
Okay, Darren, I had DMT the first time, and when I did, everything in the room turned to crystal. It was really beautiful. The next time I done it, I haven't done it for years, but the next time I done it, I had demons shouting at me, see what happens when you F with the food of the gods? And what they were doing, they were trying to make me panic and they were trying to yell at me and make me panic. But I knew it was a DMT, and I knew, because it only lasts for about an hour and a half, and I knew just ride it out and everything will be okay. But I got attacked by demons for probably an hour, but they were just screaming at me, and they were trying to stampede my mind into an insanity. But my mind was a little bit stronger and I could deal with it. Never again, no.
So Israel gives the Palestinians a state. Haven't seen a war in Israel since 1967. Now all of a sudden we see one in 2023. And it's still...
Darren, it looks like earwax. You put it on top of the cone and you smoke it.
Going in 24. As part of the agreement, you watch. I bet you Israel takes control of the Temple Mount.
Amen, Darren, 100%.
This allows Jews to pray at the temple, which has not been done over 2,000 years. It allows the Jews to sacrifice a red heifer, clean themselves, and start animal sacrifice. Then, and only then, the Antichrist steps forward and stops the animal sacrifices on or near the middle of the tribulation. 2 Thessalonians 2:4 says he sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. That's the goal of Lucifer. He wants to be God. He wants the worship he saw God give. And this happens on, about, or around in the middle of the tribulation. So the Antichrist, the arrival of the Antichrist, in my opinion, must be soon. Now, let me put this together in a picture here. So, as I told you in the writing, the book Secret Door to Understand Bible Prophecy, which you can get at prophecyclub.com, the voice said, the 7 seals play over 7 years. The 7 trumpets play over 7 months. The 7 vials play over 7 days. Unquote. That's what it said. Meaning the first seal starts the tribulation. Byron Searle and Terry Bennett both say the tribulation has started, and Vicky Parnell said it would start within days, and I forget the date, but it was on, about, or around the same day. They all say October 5th or close to that, which is the Day of Atonement, which would be the day that everything stops. That is the last judgment. The next judgment is here. The next judgment is day.
Hang on, it's clearing up, guys.
Jesus burns all of the tares with fire. 10 days later, it is the great white throne. That's the Day of Atonement. This beast is the last judgment. This is the judgment of the living. This is the judgment of the dead. This is the judgment have the opportunity to receive Jesus. This is the judgment of those that did not have the opportunity to receive Jesus.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are we talking about? We're saying that I think it's Vicky Parnell says the first 5 seals are opened. I think it was Terry Bennett said the first 4 seals are open. I can't remember how many Byron Searle says, but he also agrees that there's been, I think he says 4 seals. Hard to remember all this stuff. But in the middle of the tribulation is where John eats the sweet roll. 2 witnesses with the morning star arrive. War in heaven, dragon is cast out. And that's when he comes down and inhabits.
That usually means the Wi-Fi's dropped out, guys. Hang on. Connected. Oh, where was it? Where is it? Oh, man. I think I lost it. Yeah, I lost that one, guys. Sorry. Hang on. Yeah, not there. Okay.
Don't buy another pair of glasses until you've seen what this new invention can do. These self-adjustable glasses are taking the world by storm. They let you achieve a perfect...
Cannot declare war. You know that, right? The U.S.
I've never played this before, but it's just good to rewatch some things.
Let me tell you a little bit about nuclear war. This is something serious. I realize it's serious, but if you don't come to church, you're probably never going to hear it. So I'm going to tell you some facts. You ready for some facts about nuclear war if it were to happen? Too heavy for you. I skipped this. No? Are you still with me?
Yes.
All right, let's do this. Number 1. And this is from a book, by the way, just called Nuclear War: A Scenario by a writer named Annie Jacobsen. She said this: I'm summarizing. The US president cannot declare war. You know that, right? The US president has no authority, no power to declare war.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
But he can start a nuclear war. You say, what? Yep, it makes no sense, but that's the law in America. The president has no authority to start any war unless it's a nuclear war. Number two, the US president cannot retaliate or respond to any early warning system of an impending nuclear attack for 6 minutes. So the moment they see that a launch happens from Russia, they have 6 minutes that they must wait. And the president will think it over for 6 minutes. The US strategy is based on the assumption that A, nobody will launch, and B, if somebody launches, it won't be us. So the whole war game scenario is built around this premise that we will not be the first to strike. Which is a funny thing because the US is the only country to have struck another country using nuclear weapons. We made the first strike twice. So we are not as innocent as we'd like to believe. 5, the potential destruction is billions of casualties. It goes from million in the first few seconds to hundreds of millions to billions within about a week. The USA has 400 underground silos and about 1,770 nuclear weapons deployed. Deployed means that it can be launched within 60 seconds to 2 hours. Russia has about an equal number, 1,674 nuclear weapons deployed. Even if launched from mainland Russia, it would take only 26 minutes and 40 seconds for the missile from Russia to reach the US East Coast. That's all you got, 26 minutes, while Biden's is thinking for his first 6 minutes. Where did I leave my glasses? Where did I leave my teeth? It would take, you got another crazy superpower that doesn't like us. You got North Korea. They don't like us. So they can usually they want to start this stuff with some madman. Like, you know, the World War II started with the assassination of Ferdinand, Archduke Ferdinand, whatever his name was. And he was like, that's just an excuse. Why would the whole world go to war for that guy? But they'll use some crazy event like that, like a false flag it's called. And what's his name? Kim Jong-un. Kim Jong-un. Like a teenager with a nuclear weapon. It would take 33 minutes for a nuclear missile from Pyongyang, North Korea to reach Washington, D.C. And submarines are much faster and much worse. They are undetectable until it's too late. So she called them sneaky hell machines. The submarines now are the deadliest deployers of nuclear weapons. Number 7. A lot of people don't know this. Launch missiles cannot be recalled and cannot be redirected unless you're Superman and you're in Superman number 2. Superman did that, right? 2 nuclear warheads went off, and then Superman kind of pushed them around. Well, that's total fiction. We don't have any way to redirect a nuclear missile. So once one goes, that's it. The cascading effect is just awful. And we're in the Red Horse, which is a time of war, so we need to pray that sane people rule this country. Number 8, it's my comment. I believe we're absolutely mad to not talk to Putin. We are one misunderstanding away from a nuclear World War III, or possibly one false flag event away from the apocalyptic Red Horse unleashing maximum pain. I believe wise, reconciliatory, cooperative communication could solve so many global problems. Is it worth risking World War III by putting Ukraine into NATO?
Not if that's the plan is.
Worth it? All we'd have to say is just call up Putin and say, you know what, we cancel that plan. We don't think that's a smart move. We don't want to do that. Is this heavy? It's pretty heavy. That's the heaviest part. Okay, I'm going to start landing here. Pastor said we circle around a lot, preachers. We're going to land. I'm going to land, okay? How shall we pray? Can you allow me to teach you how the New Testament teaches us to pray for justice? If you'd like to know more how I pray, I said, please go download a free chapter, all free. discoverchurch.online/I-pray. I'm giving a free chapter so that you see how I've prayed prayers that got answered for the past 30 years. Prayers that got answered. I'm collecting them into a book. I'm nearly done. It's just taking a while because I'm going state to state to state nonstop. But you go to discoverchurch.online/I-pray, download it for free, and it'll show you the subject of deliverance. How do you get delivered from suffering and enemies? Just one out of maybe about 50 chapters I'll do. Short chapters. This one is one of the longer ones, so I give it to you for free. You may have never heard of it before. It may raise some questions in your mind, but just be open enough to search for it in the Bible. We're lopsided. We've lost the balance. We've lost the balance. We're so heavy on love, mercy, and grace because it feels good to us. It's all about us. Bless me, take care of me, forgive me. But we forgot, what about the injustices in this world? What about all the pain and suffering in this world? Anyone going to correct that? People can do grave sins and we have no power. I'm going to show you we have power. Paul had power. Did we lose this power? And see, God is so wise. He thought about all this ahead of time. Somebody later on would preach cessationism. You know what this is, right? They say, well, the miracles were done away with. The gifts were done away with. This kind of power was done away with. You say, well, when was it done away with? Oh, with Jesus. Then you open the New Testament and you say, wait a second, Peter, John, they're healing the blind, the lame. So come again, when did this power end? Oh, it ended not with Jesus. It ended with the 12 apostles. Okay, so you go a little bit further in the book of Acts, you find Acts 13. Oh, who's Paul? He's not even part of the 12 apostles. You can't even say if you walk with Jesus and the power dissipated with those people who got to be physically close to Jesus. Paul never even met Jesus other than in a vision. So come again, when did these gifts dissipate? The New Testament says Jesus Christ the same today, yesterday, today, and forever. They never vanished. They never disappeared. This is the teaching of the Lord. The message of justice under the new covenant is the teaching of the Lord, the doctrine of the Lord. It's never changed.
Is our nation on the decline? Will America be judged? Or will God have his own great reset? What if God is about to birth Christian nations all over the earth? What if Christians are about to be given authority to rule with the King? Are you ready? Christians have lost a theology of justice. The church has forgotten the template for good government. The time has come for transformation. Pastor Steve Cioccolatti's book, Trump's Unfinished Business, contains 10 prophecies to save America and any nation whose leaders will obey. Get a copy of Trump's Unfinished Business, 10 Prophecies to Save America for yourself by going to Amazon.com or scan the QR code on your screen. Listen to what readers are saying. Alan Parker, president of Justice Foundation, said,
Okay, guys, that looks like it's out. I'm
we
out,
need
guys.
pastors and preachers to read this book and apply the law of God correctly and preach it again to America and to the world. Dr. Dennis Lindsay, CEO of Christ for the Nations, said, the insights of this book will provide hope for the future of America and preserve its calling as a lighthouse to the nations. And Rod B.
Okay, guys, I'm out. God bless.
Excellent, insightful, and offers solutions to a